Radio, live from the
How do you want leaders to stand up to Donald Trump? Or do you want them to stand up at all? Then we'll take a break from Politics for Live Music Friday with Cuban-born pianist Zamora and her jazz trio. That's all ahead in the first hour of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. The Israeli military has ordered the demolition of dozens of Palestinian homes in the Jenin refugee camp in the occupied West Bank. Jenin has been a focal point of Israel's extended military operation in the enclave, the longest in more than 2 decades. NPR's Kat Lonsdorf has more.
In an order obtained by NPR, Israeli Commander Avi Bluth instructed troops to demolish 95 residential buildings in the neighborhood beginning this week. This is part of a 2-month-long operation that Israel says is for counterterrorism. The military has already emptied the camp of residents. The Israeli military told NPR the demolitions are a, quote, operational necessity, and that residents can contact authorities to, quote, explore the possibility of getting their belongings. Palestinian officials in Jenin tell NPR that Israel has yet to allow residents to collect personal items. More than 40,000 Palestinians in the West Bank have been displaced by Israel's military operation there. Israeli officials have said that those who have fled will not be allowed to return. Kat Lonsdorf, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
International travel has been disrupted today. London's Heathrow Airport shut down. A gigantic fire at a nearby substation cut the power to the airport. Hundreds of thousands of airline passengers are affected worldwide. Some people are just stuck at Heathrow. John Moriarty was trying to fly home to Boston.
I've called Delta and all the lines are busy, so they're not answering. I just called American Express Travel to see if they can help. I'm waiting. All the lines are busy.
The head of the International Air Transport Association is outraged with London's Heathrow Airport. Willie Walsh wants to know why one of the world's most important airports is dependent on a single power source without an alternative. He wants to know who is going to pay for the planning failure. NPR has been reporting on a development at the Department of Veterans Affairs that left 40,000 veterans facing foreclosure on their homes. NPR has learned many of them have now been put into new affordable mortgages through a VA rescue program. But as NPR's Chris Arnold reports, some in Congress want to eliminate the rescue program.
15,000 vets and their families now have new low-interest rate loans from the VA. Many were on what's called a COVID mortgage forbearance. That let struggling homeowners skip payments till they recovered financially. It was also supposed to give them an affordable way to get current on their loans again. But then the VA pulled the plug on a key part of the program, stranding all these vets with no way to catch up. The new rescue program fixes that problem, but some Republicans in Congress want to basically kill it because they say it puts taxpayer money at risk. Industry and housing groups warn scrapping the program without replacing it with something else would mean foreclosures for a lot of veterans. Chris Arnold, NPR News.
On Wall Street, stocks are lower. The Dow Jones Industrials are down 220 points. The Nasdaq is down more than 50. This is NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Following on the heels of Boston Mayor Michelle Wu's State of the City address this week, where she stood tall against the Trump administration, Attorney General Andrea Presley told a group of business leaders last night that she will continue to go to combat with Trump's agenda. Her words are, "Bring it on." In the 2 months since he's been in office for his second term, Presley's office has already sued the Trump administration at least a half dozen times. She accuses Trump of operating like a king. The commissioner of the Massachusetts Department of Agriculture has sent a letter to Washington calling on the federal government to release frozen funds for farmers and reinstate staff at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Commonwealth Beacon reports that Commissioner Ashley Randall says the farmers in Massachusetts are preparing for their growing season, which means they got to decide on what crops to grow, how many greenhouses to build, and how much money to spend. Federal funding freezes and staff cuts at that level, initiated by the Trump administration, have created lots of uncertainty across lots of different industries. In sports, the Celtics play the Jazz in Utah tonight. Exhibition baseball, Red Sox and Pirates play. That's a 6 o'clock game. And there are 32 NCAA basketball games today. 16 on the men's side, 16 on the women's side. You are going to need more TVs. In the forecast, rain ending today, high in the mid to upper 40s. We may see some sun this afternoon, clearing sky overnight tonight, low 37. We're at 40 degrees in Boston right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the estate of Joan B. Kroc, whose bequest serves as an enduring investment in the future of public radio and seeks to help NPR be the model for high-quality journalism in the 21st century. This is NPR.
Eastern Browdy, I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. Thank you. Broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to hear some great live jazz in about a half hour. Sue O'Connell, she's been away from us for a while, but she's back at noon, and Judge Nancy Gertner is going to join us later in the show to ask if judges in the courtrooms of America are going to be able to fight back against Donald Trump or not. Good morning, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. How are you?
I'm well.
So we talked about, what's that?
Well, I'm well.
Well, is that it?
Very
or is
good.
there more
very
to
good.
it?
No, I'm anxiety-ridden like a lot of other people.
Well, that's shocking. That's very unusual. So we talked about this with our guests a lot on the show this week, and now we want to spend some time talking to you about it, opening phone and text lines to check on what resistance can and should look like 2 months into Trump's second term. On one hand, you have a bunch of people like Chuck Schumer, who obviously is the leader of the Democrats, who capitulated to Trump and the GOP in a budget resolution, a ton of corporate leaders and university leaders who are hiding under their desks. And on the other hand, you have Bernie Sanders, Ocasio-Cortez speaking out of town halls across the country and on social media, the CEOs of Costco and Starbucks defending diversity, equity, and inclusion. And obviously back home here, there's Mayor Wu, who referred to, quote, presidents who think they are kings during her State of the City address Tuesday. That prompted a response actually from the White House, I assume you know. He accused her of, quote, doubling down on giving sanctuary to violent criminal immigrants. For the next, half hour, we're asking you at 877-301-8970, if you're not happy with what you're seeing from the Trump White House, which strategy is best in the long run? And when you do hear from leaders, some folding, some fighting, does that not have an effect on how you respond to policies and actions that you find troubling? The number is 877-301-8970 is the number.
Yeah, why don't we start with a little bit of sound from the State of the City.
Sure.
Mayor Wu, her address when she criticized Donald Trump and the White House responded attacking her. Here it is.
So while this national moment isn't the one I and so many families had hoped for, I am grateful that my daughter gets to call this city home. No one tells Boston how to take care of our own. Come high water or hell, no matter who threatens to bring it, Boston has stood up for the people we love and the country we built. God bless our city, God bless our people, and God save whoever messes with Boston.
And obviously the hell reference was to Tom Homan, the bullying border czar, who was saying he was going to bring hell to Boston. The number is 877-301-8970. And I think it's pretty clear the kind of response you and I like. But the flip side is we were talking to Elon Stobbins from Amherst College the other day. A leader who's been very successful so far with Trump is not doing the heavy-handed resistance at all. Claudia Sheinbaum, the new president of Mexico, has basically played him with niceness, which may not feel great when you're watching it, but so far she's gotten what she wants for her people. But what I really believe is the second thing I said, when you see a leader whom you respect, whether it's a CEO or a university president or a politician, doing X, either folding or fighting, I think in huge part for ordinary people like the rest of us, it determines how we feel we can respond to things that are troubling.
Well, I think we've heard over and over, this is the analogy is the bully in the schoolyard.
Yeah.
If you keep giving your lunch money to the bully in the schoolyard, he's going to keep coming after you or she for your lunch money, and if you stand up to the bully, it'll stop. And I think we're doing kind of what the opposite is of the tried and true response to this kind of bullying. I was stunned to read in the New York Times about this big law firm.
This is unbelievable.
Trump is going after law firms in D.C., firms that have represented like Jack Smith or Hillary Clinton. Jack Smith, of course, is the prosecutor that's going after him on the January 6th case and the moving documents case out of the White House, and Hillary Clinton obviously ran against him. He's going after firms that have represented Democrats and said he's going to blackball the clients of people who go to those law firms and the law firms themselves and make it really hard for them to do business. So this big hotshot law firm in D.C., the CEO goes to the White House, has a face-to-face with Donald Trump, and he basically agrees to Trump's demands. He says they're going to represent clients no matter what their political affiliation. He's going to contribute $40 million in legal services to causes Trump has champions, including the president's task force to combat anti-Semitism. And by the way, more and more people are saying this is really not about combating
it's an anti-free speech thing, as we discussed yesterday with Donald Lieberman.
It's not about anti-Semitism, really.
Yeah.
And then he even agreed to say an awful thing about this guy Pomerantz, who used to work for the company. The CEO of this law firm had to acknowledge wrongdoing by one of the firm's former partners, this Mark Pomerantz, who tried to build a criminal case against Trump back when he was working for the Manhattan's district attorney's office. This guy Pomerantz had to come out and say, I didn't do anything wrong, but his former boss, if he was basically threw this guy right under the bus. So I thought that was one of the depressing things I've read in a long time, because they would lose some money. There's no question about it, but they have a lot of money to lose, kind of like Harvard.
Well, first of all, we're going to discuss that in some depth, the legal aspects with Judge Gertner in the noon hour. How do you live with yourself when you do that, especially since they did absolutely nothing wrong? And also, if you're a client to be, is that the kind of law firm you want to go to, who fights for you until they capitulate because Donald Trump is upset with them? I mean, it is embarrassing. Our number is 877-301-8970. We want to know your thoughts about the resistance or lack of resistance from people in high places.
And meanwhile, we should point out that to Bernie Sanders, how old is he now? 83?
80-something.
He's running around the country getting these huge crowds talking about standing up to Donald Trump. And he's been joined by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She is a 35-year-old congresswoman from New York. There's been a lot of talk about how she should primary Chuck Schumer for Senate from New York, because Schumer capitulated to Trump and the Republicans on this to keep the government open. And we've had our own local politicians have had these town hall type things, Warren and Ed Markey and Seth Moulton and
they've been standing up, I should say, quite a bit. 877-301-8970. And we're going to discuss this also later in our media segment. Obviously, the bowing down of media. Jeff Bezos at the Washington Post, ABC News paying $15 million to Trump for what George Stephanopoulos said, which was a violation of nothing. In any case, let's get your thoughts. Kate in Concord, you're first on Boston Public Radio. Thank you for calling, Kate. Hi.
Hi. Thank you very much, Jim and Marjorie.
Thank you.
And although I'm from Concord, I'm out of state right now driving, and I figured I still needed to screen you.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
You're my daily dose of, dare I say, sanity.
You're a kind soul. What's up, Kate?
What's up is answering your two questions. One is, how do I feel about Chuck Schumer? And the other is what to do.
Yeah.
How I felt about Chuck Schumer is kind of how I felt about Trump and Zelensky in the Oval Office. Kind of similar.
Meaning?
Like two gut punches.
Yeah.
Right? Just like, how is it that we continue to fight if you're not?
Well, see, I think that's the most important thing, more than important than the budget resolution. I think average people, even if they don't consciously make that decision, they say you're the most powerful Democrat, in quotes, in the Senate. And if you can't stand up to the worst of this administration, how am I supposed to in any way stand up? And I don't buy that, but I think that's the mindset of people who feel disempowered, which many of us do in this environment. Kate, thanks for the call. We really appreciate it. 877-301-8970 is the number.
You know, I've gotten some texts from people that say that that Wu took some hits because she was standing against the vote for Trump and the upset about the border. But it's important to remember.
What do you mean?
Well, that when she was talking about protecting immigrants, people in this town, the White House was lying when they responded to her. They're saying that, she doesn't want to be. What's the quote? That she doesn't care about violent, illegal immigrants that are here, and that's just kind of the spin. Their lying spin. That's not true. They said Boston's radical mayor puts violent, criminal, illegal aliens first. The headline in the White House release, and that's a lie. She said over and over again. And the other guys that were there, the mayors were there, said over and over again that if you are a legal person who is here illegally and you committed a crime besides just coming over the border,
and ICE has a warrant,
you will be you'll be handed over to ICE and they deal with you. So they're lying, but they lie about so many things. I think people get really confused. Paul in Newton, thank you for calling.
Hello, Paul.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, listen, I read that story, the New York Times story about Paul Weiss.
Yeah.
At 4 a.m. Couldn't go back to sleep.
By the way, stop for a second. Marjorie has something to tell you.
Called because
Go ahead.
I just 5 minutes ago, right before we went on the air, Paul, I said to Jim, sometimes if I wake up in the middle of the night and I can't sleep, I start reading on my phone, and I read that story and I got so upset. I had to stop reading it and go to a book I was reading instead to calm down. You and me both. We were both up in the middle of the night, horrified.
But go ahead, Paul.
That's funny. Well, I was a junior lawyer at Paul Weiss years ago.
Oh, my God.
Arthur Lyman, who was an extraordinary lawyer and liberal and Democrat. And this was a horror show. I mean, I also know Mark Pomerantz. I worked with him in the U.S. Attorney's Office in the early 80s. He's a splendid lawyer, a splendid human being. And they just threw him under the bus. It just casually, like it was just an incidental aspect of this ridiculous deal they made.
So what do you think is going on, Paul?
They're protecting a multi-billion-dollar business. I understand that. But if they're not going to fight this illegal, autocratic nonsense, then who's going to fight it?
I'm with you. Paul, that was an excellent call, and thanks for explaining the connections. We really appreciate it. Here is a different point of view, though. An anonymous texter says, enough already about Bernie and AOC. They have no risk by standing up against Trump. They should keep doing it, but it's not the same as a leader of a company, law firm, or university. That is totally true.
It's a good point.
But it still doesn't justify the hiding out of so many people in companies, in law firms, and in universities. Are we going to have the head of UMass Boston next week or next week? We're going to talk to him also about why there is not what Marjorie has said repeatedly, why there are not a bunch of Tuesdays actually going to be here, leaders who are standing up together. I understand it's tough to stand up by yourself. You make yourself a bigger target. But why are they not doing it collectively and challenging Trump? I don't really get it.
And by the way, the Wall Street Journal has reported that Columbia is close to yielding to these demands. I mean, Trump has threatened them with $400
putting
million.
the three departments in receivership?
Well, it didn't detail if they were going to do every single one, but it implied, you read that story, and implied that they were close to yielding to his demands because he's threatened to take away $400 million in federal funding, and the administration basically wants to oversee how they teach courses in African American studies, African studies, and Middle Eastern studies,
and Southeast Asian
studies. So I don't know, but the Atlantic reported on it too, that's what they think Columbia's going to do.
Adam from Boston says, hi there, is Jim still driving his Tesla? So he only wants other people to stand up, just not him.
Well,
thank you, says Adam in Boston.
I think we do have to admit a lot of hypocrisy here because I've yet to get rid of my Amazon Prime membership, so I'm a hypocrite too.
So do I get any points? I know, by the way, I would dismiss what I'm about to say too, so feel free to ridicule me. I would not have bought this car I've been in the market for a car in the last 60 days. But it is true, I'm not dumping the one I have that was bought during the Biden administration. So
but I like to
that's
think,
a legitimate
Jim,
criticism.
in our small little way, we are standing up here.
How would that be?
Well, we're kind of critical of the president and his actions. So
I spent $112 on Amazon last night at midnight while lying in bed. You're not reading, you and that caller are reading about Paul Weiss Rifkin, the law firm.
At 2 o'clock in the morning.
I'm ordering Tupperware at
good.
For $112.
Well, you use a lot of Tupperware, Jim.
I do use a lot.
Jane in Brookline.
Jim is my name, actually.
Jim, I was thinking about Jane in Brookline who's calling. What do you think, Jane?
Hello, Jane.
Hi. I call often. I love your show.
Thanks.
I was so depressed this morning after I read Heather Cox Richardson.
Yeah, Marjorie was talking about.
I called Elizabeth Warren's office because I had this epiphany. We have all these presidents that we voted for: Biden, Obama, Clinton, Bush. Plus, we also voted for all those vice presidents. I think that that there needs to be an intervention, and instead of, bowing down, they bow up and really address, somehow or another start working together. And I know it's just a crazy idea, but I've had a lot of crazy ideas lately, like wanting everybody to take their Tesla. Sorry, Jim.
It's okay.
Drive them and put them in the middle of a green space and just leave them there all over the United States and neglect them.
Well, can we get back? Let's stay away from the Teslas for a minute. Can we go back to the president's thing? Each of those presidents, with one exception, has individually stood up. George Bush. And it's amazing, considering how he's treated both Bush's brother, Jeb, Bush himself, ridiculed Bush's behavior in a whole bunch of fronts. But I hadn't even thought of what you just said. Can you imagine a press conference tomorrow with every living president? I know the Trump people in the White House don't give a damn today, but maybe that adds to the chorus that we need. That's a brilliant idea, Jane. Thanks.
They couldn't exhume Ronald Reagan because they just have a few words to say about Russia, the evil empire. But
read the piece that Patty Davis wrote the other day, his daughter,
about what her father would have wanted, and she didn't even get along with him when he.
I know exactly.
But I want to mention Heather Cox Richardson has a piece in Substack. We're going to talk about it more with Nancy Gertner coming up next, asking that question about whether these judges are going to be able to withstand this constant pummeling from Donald Trump. And don't forget, Donald Trump appointed a lot of judges, and are the judges that he appointed going to stand up against him?
Most of them have so far, including Amy Coney Barrett on the Supreme Court of the United States. We got to take a break.
Okay, we're talking about how should people stand up if you're not happy with what's going on in the White House. And also all the places getting shuttered, like Voice of America, the Department of Education, what could happen with Social Security. How do you want people to react? What are you doing? What do you think the politicians should be doing? The Democrats should be doing? You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
One day in the 1970s, a Cambodian refugee in California tasted his first American donut.
And he said it reminded him of a real Cambodian donut called Nom Kong, that it instantly brought him back to his childhood.
Not even a decade later, Ted Noy became a donut shop tycoon. That story and more next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts. BSU's skilled graduates are recruited by today's industry leaders, elevating business in Boston and beyond. bridgew.edu/elevate. And the Massachusetts Health Connector for Business. New premium value plans can help small business owners find and offer accessible employee health benefits. Learn more at mahealthconnector.org/business.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Mark Dregan and Jim Browdy. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're talking about leaders. Thank you. We're talking about leaders' reactions the Trump politicians, corporate leaders, university leaders. Some are ducking under their desks. I don't know if it's out of fear or because they think it's a better strategy. Others are standing up fiercely, I would say. And so we want to know which you think will work best in the long run. And two, is your response to things you don't like in this administration in part determined based upon how you see leaders whom you respect responding to Donald Trump?
Lisa from Medford says, I've been so disappointed with the Dems. I joined Indivisible. I want a plan, action items, and if our reps and senators aren't on board, they'll have to go. In short, we need a Project 2026 and beyond. The GOP is eating our lunch because of our lack of planning and execution. And that is a great point. You know, when the Dobbs decision was made that basically outlawed abortion, how long had the GOP been working on that? Since 1975 or something, since shortly after
Mitch
Roe v. Wade.
McConnell, from the moment he took over there, yeah.
And how, I mean, it's obvious what's going on while in the 4 years Trump was out of office, right? All these people behind Project 25 have planned to do all these different things, to attack this, to attack that. And of course, the president said he didn't know anything about it when he was running for office. But they're enacting all these plans that they've laid out for 4 years. So what plans are we laying out in the well, I'm an independent, but what plans are the Democrats laying out?
Honestly,
yeah.
I think they have plans for lunch today. I think at 12:15 to 12. By the way, speaking of, this doesn't really relate, but I was thinking about it. I was watching CNN behind you. One of the brilliances of Trump in the flood the zone line, I'm sorry to keep using the Steve Bannon thing, but it's perfect. So the morning starts with Elon Musk at the Pentagon, either getting briefed on war plans for China if we ever need them or not. But he was at the Pentagon getting a briefing. That's over. 10 seconds later, the Trump administration announced that he and the credibly accused sexual abusing, too much drinking Secretary of Defense are going to have a press conference in the Oval Office. They never allow breathing room, and the Democrats, the vast majority, just don't know have any idea how to stay up with them, and it's really sad.
And the incredible thing about Musk is that his biggest Tesla factory is in China. I think the Chinese government gave him $2.8 billion to help him build that factory, and they've given a lot of money to his other companies. And Tesla sales are going up there, unlike in the United States of America. So he's got huge conflicts of interest involving.
And nobody. Do you know a real person who cares about that? Who is either a Trump supporter or Trump-leaning? Do you know one person? Have you heard one person saying you're concerned about those conflicts of interest and billions of taxpayer dollars?
I think people are more concerned about his seeing war plans involving China. Because
I don't think anybody's concerned about it.
You don't think so?
I hope you're right.
I'm concerned. I mean, I think the guy is not exactly the most stable guy in the world. You know what I mean?
The president or Musk?
Well, either of them, but particularly Musk. You know, I don't know they should be doing this ketamine when you're slashing these agencies left and right.
Here is
people out of work.
Sarah in Westboro. Since February 28th, said text, I canceled my Prime subscription and stopped buying at Amazon. Well, I'm sorry, Amazon, Walmart, and Target. I propose we raise cash in the next pledge drive for Jim to buy a new car and drop the Tesla. Sarah, I'll talk to you after the show. Sophia, you're in Cambridge. You're on Boston Public Radio. Thank you much for calling. Hi.
Greetings. I have 5 resistance points.
Okay.
Number 1, I've written to the White House to let them know I will not be buying anything American. If they think that it's a problem outsourcing jobs and companies, then Trump should have thought about that when he outsourced his own job to somebody from out of the country.
Oh, number 2.
I am supporting all the congressional candidates and people who are in power who are actually supportive of our movement. And so that's the best way to do it. I call Elizabeth Warren's office and let her know that the wind's at her back. I've given to Michelle Wu to tell her that as well. Number 3, I've let go of all the people in my life who were Trump supporters, period. And I've let them know they can't breathe the air that I breathe.
4.
If you decide that you want to jump off a bridge and kill yourself, it's one thing. If you want to take the rest of us down with you, you and I we don't sort of orbit the world. And I don't understand why everybody's having civil conversations with their Trump friends when they've destroyed our lives.
4.
Number 4, I print out Heather Cox Richardson's articles every day. I laminate them, and I put them outside the fence of my home, and people read them all day long.
That's great.
Fabulous. And what's 5?
I find people just lined up, writing them all the time.
That's great. What's 5?
So it's wonderful. And then I myself yes, I have goodbye Prime, goodbye everybody. And I let them know. I'm not silent about it. I don't just sort of go quietly and disengage. I let the company know. I think that you had weeks ago given us a website that talked about who was supporting, which companies were supporting.
Goods Unite Us is the name of the app.
Goods Unite Us. And I go in there and I make sure that the companies and the things that I'm supporting are being rewarded and that they know it.
Can I tell you, by the way, Sophia,
that
was not only a great call, but you are an impressive person with an agenda. I'm glad you brought up Goods Unite Us. I had been pitching it because it does list for you. If you type in a corporate name, it tells you who the executives have donated to, but it sometimes is only partial picture. For example, Target, which is faded on DEI and selling LGBTQ themed things, particularly during Pride Week. I think I checked 2 nights ago, their CEOs, 52% of their executives, 52% of their donations go to Democrats. So it doesn't provide a full picture of where they are, but it's part of the kind of research that people like Sophia are doing. Thanks, Sophia, for the call.
Here's an interesting text from Kate and Newton. I'm really mixed about the resistance. I'm doing a lot of my own personal resistance, no target, etc. But part of me, I'm sad to say, wants to see it burn down. Enough talking about Canada. You want to annex it? Let's see it. If you want to gut our institutions, go for it. Things need to get really bad before they get better. Otherwise, we'll just have 4 years of biting around the edges. We need to not make this mistake of voting for someone like him again.
Yeah, but we hear that a lot. It needs to be blood in the streets, and I totally sympathize with it, and I felt that way myself from time to time. The problem with that is those of us who are upper middle class could probably weather that kind of period. Those who are really dependent on the best that government does can't. And so I know it's heartfelt, and I understand your desires, but the reality is that a lot of what Musk and Trump are targeting is something that a lot of people in this country, maybe half the people in this country, couldn't live without.
Doug in Dorchester, thanks for calling.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for taking my call. Longtime fan.
Thank you.
So I think that we need to unite the resistance around one thing, and that is defending the Constitution. All of the other things that are happening to transgender people, to the layoffs of the federal workers, to deportations and so forth are devastating. But when I hear people say, how are we going to get through the next 4 years, I cringe, because that is not what Trump wants. Trump wants to be like Putin, and he wants to rule this country for 25 years. And I just think we need to be very, very focused on making sure that the Constitution remains intact. I think the first thing that we're seeing of that falling apart is the defying of the judges' orders. We need to keep that from happening. I feel like if nothing changes and Trump continues to mismanage the country as poorly as he is now, he will not let the midterm elections happen in 2026.
I agree with you. Can I get back to your...
I hadn't heard of that. I didn't thought
I've heard that too. But can I respond to your constitutionality thing? The reason why it's a good idea is you say focus on one thing. It is one thing that's really an umbrella for almost everything, because the challenges to a lot of these actions are about constitutionality. The second thing, though, when you say, and we're going to talk to Judge Gertner about this at, I think, 12:30, when Trump violates a court order that I would argue he's doing already, you said, quote, we have to stop that. And my question for you, Doug, is how would you suggest we stop that if he chooses to just ignore court orders? I mean, we'll ask Judge Gertner this too, but what's your answer to that one?
So I think, unfortunately, we have to stop talking about all the other terrible things that Trump is doing, because there are two sides to that story, right? It's very easy for Fox News and the conservative media to point to, reasonable reasons that we should be laying off federal workers, we should be deporting immigrants. No one, not Fox News, not Newsmax, no one can say that we should ignore the Constitution.
Okay, I hear you. When he violates when a court finds out he's violated the Constitution, orders him to do X, and he chooses not to do that, again, quickly, how do we stop that, to use your words?
I know I know it sounds strange, but in my mind, we stop it by talking about all of the other things that he's doing because we lose focus on the most critical one that could have us in the same very bad situation for decades.
Got it.
And I think we risk making the same mistake that Biden did, which was, yes, he did a whole bunch of great policy things, but he didn't focus on the most critical thing, which is to keep a dictator from getting back into power.
Well, actually, he did, Doug. But in all fairness, what I said before, it was, I think, one of Biden's great failings. We didn't see Biden for ages. We've seen Trump or Trump-related people twice, and it's not even noon yet. Because he's there, he's everywhere. And
well, Biden shouldn't have run again, obviously.
That's another. Well, he didn't, but he should have dropped that earlier. Doug, thank you for your thoughts and your call. We appreciate it.
Okay, listen to this. One of the ways I'm fighting back, besides flipping off every Cybertruck by Tesla that I pass, is I've started buying only Canadian whiskey. I'm sending weekly emails to Canadian whiskey companies why I'm paying more to buy their product, plus emailing the major Kentucky bourbon companies as to why I'm boycotting them, because 64.5% of their population elected this fascist. Elbows up, says John, the Waltham mailman.
Did you read last night that almost every Cybertruck in America, this is that horrible, weird-looking truck from Tesla, almost all of them are subject to recall. Did you read that?
No, I did not.
Yeah.
Why?
And there's a panel that keeps falling off or some such thing, so that's the deal.
Maybe it's a scam. Maybe Elon's just going to scrap them all.
I don't think so. I think that is so him. Don't you think that car is who he is? I think so.
I don't know who he is. I mean, he dressed up a little bit.
What are you looking at Jamie for? What are you going to ask Jamie who he is?
I'm looking at the TV to see if I could see Elon going into the Pentagon. He was a little dressed up more than usual today. He had a jacket.
No tie.
No tie.
Yep.
Okay, we are out of time. Thank you very much for all your calls and texts. We're going to take a break from all this political stuff because it is Live Music Friday. We're going to hear some great jazz in just a second. Cuban-born pianist Xylee Zamora is here ahead of a show next Thursday in Roxbury. We're going to hear all about that and find out how you can get tickets, etc. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Support for GBH comes from you and MIT Sloan Executive Education. You can advance your career with 2 to 3 day courses designed for professionals. Topics include leadership, innovation, and strategic management. Learn more at executive.mit.edu. And Revision Energy, a solar company and a Mitsubishi Electric heating and air conditioning contractor, committed to helping customers lower their environmental impact, offering all-electric heat pump systems from Mitsubishi Electric. RevisionEnergy.com. And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer, the Unclaimed Property Division, is holding unclaimed funds from utility bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov. On the next Great Performances at the Met, a high-flying opera follows a fighter pilot who operates a drone in a high-tech world, battling both war and motherhood. Watch Grounded tonight at 9 on GBH2.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Mark Regan and Jim Browdy live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. It's time once again for Live Music Friday, care of Cuban-born pianist and composer Xylee Zamora. At 6 years old, she was practicing classical music for 10 hours a day. Today, she's a professor at Berkeley, performs next Thursday night at Long Live Roxbury. We're going to talk about Long Live Roxbury in a minute as part of the brewery's Jazz Night series of free live music from artists celebrated locally and around the world. Also, she is performing tonight, 7 p.m. at Scullers Jazz Club as part of the You're on Israel Quintet. She joins us now with a trio of musicians that includes bassist Abner Cabrera, drummer Connor Sturge. And if you want more information about all this stuff, including shows, you go to Xylee Zamora, ZAHILI Zamora.com. Here she is with her trio performing an original composition called Friends. Welcome to all three of you. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Xylee Zamora, along with bassist Abner Cabrera and drummer Connor Surge. Xylee is going to be performing tonight a concert at Scullers Jazz Club as part of the Euron Israel Quintet, that's at 7 o'clock, and a free concert next Thursday, March 27th, at Long Live Roxbury Brewing Company. Thank you so much. That was absolutely fantastic. And I don't know about the Long Live Roxbury Brewing Company.
We're going to talk about it.
We're going to talk about that.
Can I just say before you ask a question, the three of you look so happy playing. By the way, that was almost as much fun as the music, as watching all three of your faces. It was beautiful. Xylee and Abner are joining us, by the way. Welcome to all three of you. It's great to see you.
Yeah, so we think of jazz as an American thing, but you're from Cuba, you're from the Dominican Republic, so obviously we have spread right around the world. I mean, this is not just ours anymore, right?
Right. To me, jazz is just freedom of expression, literally, in whichever form that is. Improvisation, anything that includes improvisation. And when we say it like that, we could even say, improvisation used to be present in classical music as well, which is everything I knew up to the point I was consciously acknowledging jazz.
Yeah, when Jim said before you practiced classical music for 10 hours a day,
yes.
Did you have finger pad injuries? No?
Although I'm older now, I cannot say that I'm able to do that same thing. But not necessarily when I was 6. When I was 6, I was in the process of curiosity.
Yeah.
The piano was already at home. I was curious. I was just reaching out, and thank you, Grandma, rest in peace, that noticed my curiosity and took me to a conservatory. So I started at the age of 6, but soon after that, there was just a level of discipline. I was just drawn to the music.
Didn't you ask your family to move to Havana, or so that you would have better training? Is that not true?
That is true. How do you...
She told me. That's how I knew that.
We did our homework. We read our story.
You did your homework.
That's right.
Yes.
Abner, what's the story on jazz in the Dominican Republic?
I mean, we are lucky to have a couple of Berkeley alumni back home, and it's very interesting because the conservatory in Dominican Republic is for free.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you don't need to pay. And we got lucky that the popular department, like the popular music department director, is a Berkeley alum.
Oh, really?
So his name is Javier Vargas. So it's like there's a great thing in Dominican Republic that people want to give back. Mm-hmm. So a bunch of people came here and they went back to Dominican Republic and started, like teaching jazz, and that's how we became part of the conservatory. So you can go and do classical, but you can go there and also do like jazz.
Abner, when you say come here and then go back, it makes me think you both were born in other countries, as we just discussed a minute ago. People born in other countries not that popular in this country these days. I mean, and I don't mean everybody, but we all know what's going on around us. Starting with you, Abner, and then you, Xylee. Does that affect how you think about your music at all when you're playing, the environment in which you're playing, considering both of your backgrounds?
I think it does, but in my case, I see music as a tool that you can overcome everything. Mm-hmm. It's a universal language that you can just use to bless other people. You know what I mean? So even though there's crazy stuff happening around, music is it stays on. And even though it's present in society, and everything that happens in society will influence music, but you can stick to it and try to use music as a tool to lift up people, instead of bringing them down.
How about you, Xylee?
Music is a vessel of communication, and every artist, our way to keep our authentic selves is through our own story. We cannot forget where we come from, Being Cuban is all that represents what I am, along with classical music and along with every single other place I have visited around the world. So, now more than ever, I will hold that, Cuban flag in my music. Yeah.
Well, one more depressing question, but it would seem to me what would be impacted is what you just talked about, Abner. People going back and forth and thinking that we could just go freely back and forth between here and your country or a lot of other countries. We hear about people from France getting stopped and people from Germany getting stopped. And I would think that would be an issue that the talent might not want to come here so readily from another country.
It's more complex for me because, in Cuba, you need to have a visa. It's a way more complicated situation, even coming from Cuba. I doubt it. I highly doubt it. If I'm going to have an opinion about it, if a Cuban has the opportunity to leave the country and share the world, that they'll come.
Okay, we're done with depressing questions.
I said that was the last one, Jim.
Okay, so Bay State Banner, and we have the editor here once a month, the publisher, wrote, so much bad news, Jazz Night provides an escape. And they're specifically talking about Long Live Roxbury. Can you, Xylee, can you talk about it a minute? Long Live Roxbury, Thursday night for you,
Yes.
6 o'clock. What is that venue?
I am thankful over and over and over again for places like Long Live Roxbury who now are coming to their year. It's a year that it's been around. And musicians like me have an opportunity to go there and perform for people that actually are welcoming and appreciative of the music, and they go for the music. Mm-hmm. You know, they do offer, obviously, food and drinks, but you usually don't hear the clacking of the plates and people talking over the music, and we become a second, background music. They actually go to learn about the artist in Boston.
Xylee is saying to all of you, don't talk when they're playing in a couple
But I'm so glad you mentioned that, because sometimes you go to a place where there is an incredibly talented musician, particularly a pianist, playing, and nobody's listening. It drives me insane.
You and I went to a lunch where Grace Kelly, one of the great saxophonists, born in Brookline, was playing. Do you remember? And virtually nobody was paying attention.
Yeah.
As brilliant as she was, it was so totally
You want to get up and say, would you
disrespectful.
sit down and be quiet?
Hey, what's the local jazz? I mean, we mentioned Long Live Roxbury, and we know we have GBH's Jazz Now, and their whole. But how is the jazz scene in 2025? How hospitable, how welcoming is Boston to jazz?
I think it's amazing, to be honest. Of course, there's a difference in like comparing Boston to New York.
What's the difference?
New York is more active. There's more venues, there's more stuff, happening. But there's a thing with Boston that since there are so many music schools around, people is just willing to collaborate between each other. Like people from France, people from Dominican Republic, they got together, they create a group, and now you have this like really different flavor of these people combined. And we have venues that they have been opening, we have Wally's there.
Yeah.
We also have places like the Record Co. that a lot of independent artists are going there to record their stuff. So I think it's really good and it's growing.
We're talking with pianist and composer Xylee Zamora and bassist Abner Cabrera. Xylee's going to be doing a concert tonight at Sculler's Jazz Club at 7 o'clock, and she's going to be doing a free concert Thursday, the 27th, at Long Live Roxbury Brewing Company. So tell us about performance anxiety.
Yes! I was waiting for you to ask me about that. Okay, so in all honesty and vulnerability here, right before the pandemic started, I started seeing a life coach, therapist, for very personal reasons. And in my journey with her, I discovered that music performance anxiety was probably something I needed to tend to. I became so focused on it that I went to do my master's degree, and I actually specialized on the full research on music performance anxiety, only to discover that is something way more over the surface. Get it together. If you practice, you're good. That's it. Right? There could be a lot of psychological levels below that could get on the way of you having an enjoyable performance. So to this point, thanks to a grant that I got, I was able to create an online course called Music Performance Anxiety Workshop. It's only 5 days. It's online. It's running right now. And it's for a lot of musicians, all instrumentalists and singers, to get together. I actually hosted with my coach, Bridget Keller, and we talk about the various tools and causes, tools to face it and causes, So I'm very proud of that. In fact, the new music that I'm writing currently is based on the various layers of performance anxiety, based on personal experience.
Isn't the song you're going to play in a few minutes?
Yes.
Isn't that about despair?
It is.
Yeah. Can I ask you,
Before we move on from that,
sure.
you're not playing with music, are you? Or are you?
No.
Okay, because I think that's the scariest thing for a musician that's going to perform without music. You're going to forget.
Yeah.
And so I remember as a kid always being told, just keep going.
Right.
90% of people won't know you forgot. You can just start playing scales.
Yes.
They won't know you forgot. But that, to me, is the scariest part. No music. that you have a mental block. So what do you do?
Yeah. Oh. I look silent. Actually, it happened when we were at soundcheck. It's like I got, like a mental block. I'm like, I don't know what goes next. Yeah. But funny thing is that I was the engineer for the online course because I'm an audio engineer. I was the recording and post-production engineer. And it's funny that when they were talking, in the course and they were sharing this knowledge, I'm in the control booth like, oh man, I need to pay attention to that. Like, I realized that those teachings are something that needs to be included, in every college, in every performance, school, because we don't realize how much that impacts the way you perform.
Absolutely.
You get stressed. You get so many things are in your mind that is difficult for you to really enjoy the music.
Can I stay on this just for a second, Ziley? I was commenting. I said when you both got up here how wonderful it was to watch the happiness on all three of your faces. If seeing you today and you were like transformed, it seemed to me when you're at the piano, would I have noticed a different you if I had seen you playing before you dealt with this issue, or was it only apparent to you, not me, the listener?
Great question. I've been conditioned to smile. And Cuban music is happy, Even coming from classical music, I remember, this is a true story, coming into my first band that I was playing in. And classical music is more introspective. I could be in my own world right here, just a piano and myself. And I remember the first band leader that I worked with, she called me up and she said, look at yourself. They had recorded me on video, the concert previously. And I was just, as if I had been playing classical music, but it was a 13-piece band and everybody's moving and I'm like, she's like, you need to change that by yesterday if you want to continue playing with us. And I went like, okay, fake it till you make it. So it started,
And here she is.
Yeah, so the smile comes in naturally, although that's not to say I also enjoy the music.
I understand. Right? So what are you playing, you and your two colleagues here, when you return to that little area? What are you playing for us?
We're going to play a tune called Despair, which I composed about 3 years ago, and it really marks the beginning of all my discoveries with performance anxiety.
So do you want to gently put your headsets down on the table, and Marjorie will once again rejoin your colleague, and Marjorie will tell people how to find you.
We're going to hear Despair, pianist and composer Ziley Zamora, joined by her bassist Abner Cabrera and drummer Connor Surge. To get tickets for this event. Where's the thing about the tickets for this event? Here it is. To get tickets for the event. Oh my goodness. Where's the thing about the tickets?
You go to Ziley Zamora.
Thank you.
ZAHILI Zamora.com. You can find out everything about her performances, shows coming up, how you can RSVP, and all that kind of stuff. And here is Ziley and her colleagues playing her composition, Despair.
Oh, my goodness. The text
We
said,
got a million
and on
texts.
YouTube, perfect for this rainy day. Richard from Rhode Island, great communication between the musicians. Jonathan.
It's not over yet. More smart conversation about community issues is up ahead with Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio. Right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, Boston's greatest unsolved mystery and the world's largest art heist. This week marks the 35th anniversary of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum theft, totaling at least $500 million in stolen art. And what is not the steal of the century? The Boston Celtics have been sold for the highest ever paid for a sports team in North America, $6.1 billion. We take on that and more on The Culture Show's Week in Review, today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. In his bid to do away with the U.S. Department of Education, President Trump has just announced that the Small Business Administration will take over the department's federal student loans program effective immediately.
I've decided that the SBA, the Small Business Administration, headed by Kelly Loeffler, who's a terrific person, will handle all of the student loan portfolio. We have a portfolio that's very large, lots of loans, tens of thousands of loans, pretty complicated deal. And that's coming out of the Department of Education immediately.
Congress would have to approve the abolishment of the Education Department. Trump is speaking to reporters from the Oval Office along with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Hegseth had just wrapped up a meeting with Doge architect and tech billionaire Elon Musk. Both met in Hegseth's office at the Pentagon. It's unclear if that was in response to news reports that Musk was to be granted access to top-secret U.S. plans for possible war with China. Hegseth had said that the meeting would be informal about innovation and efficiencies. European Union leaders agreed at a summit in Brussels to keep up the pressure on Russia to end its war war on Ukraine. More from Terry Schultz.
EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas failed to get enough support for her proposed 40 billion euro assistance package for Ukraine. So she's adapted that to trying to provide 2 million artillery shells worth 5 billion euros. Kallas spoke at the EU's latest summit focused on defense investment.
Let's decide on the short term, which is the imminent needs that Ukraine has regarding the ammunition right now.
Leaders debated European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen's readiness plan, which includes EU loans to countries buying weapons from European manufacturers.
It is of utmost importance that we develop the defense industrial base in the European Union.
That's part of the bloc's urgent efforts to reduce security dependence on the U.S. For NPR News, I'm Terry Schultz in Brussels.
The federal government says that Maryland authorities failed to conduct critical tests on the Francis Scott Key Bridge before it collapsed last year, was struck by a ship. Here's WYPR Scott Massioni.
The National Transportation Safety Board's top official says the Maryland Transportation Authority failed to follow standards in assessing vulnerabilities to the Francis Scott Key Bridge. The board ran its own calculations and says when a cargo ship hit it last March, the bridge's risk of collapse was far higher than what is acceptable. NTSB Chair Jennifer Hamady says the state missed an opportunity to avert disaster.
The MDTA would have been able to proactively identify strategies to reduce the risk of a collapse and loss of lives associated with a vessel collision with the bridge.
The NTSB says the Chesapeake Bay Bridge has never been evaluated and has identified 68 other U.S. bridges across the nation that need assessment. For NPR News, I'm Scott Massioni.
From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Ahead of spring break, local colleges are urging international students and faculty to reconsider their travel plans. From our higher ed desk, GBH's Kirk Carapezza reports the guidance comes amid the Trump administration's actions against foreign-born scholars.
MIT is advising international students, temporary visa holders, and even green card holders to consider staying close to campus. In an email, the school's deans warned that visa rules, reentry requirements, and travel restrictions can change suddenly without notice. Meantime, Harvard is encouraging international students to consult their advisors, and Dartmouth is urging them to take precautions as well. The guidance follows ICE actions at Columbia and Georgetown and the deportation of a Brown University doctor. Kirk Carapezza, GBH News, 89.7.
94% of the 420 registered nurses at Beth Israel Deaconess Hospital in Plymouth have voted to authorize a 3-day strike. In a press release released last night, the nurses, who are represented by the Massachusetts Nurses Association, say they've spent months trying to convince Beth Israel Deaconess management of the need for significant improvements in staffing along with other provisions in a new union contract. Vote doesn't mean that a strike will automatically take place, though, but that the Mass Nurses Association Bargaining Committee will schedule one if they deem it necessary. Celtics play the Jazz in Utah tonight. Exhibition baseball. Red Sox and Pirates go at it at 6. 43 degrees in Boston right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Indiana University, establishing the IU Launch Accelerator for Biosciences to drive healthcare discoveries and train the next generation of innovators. More at go.iu.edu/IULab.
Here's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. Thank you. 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live at the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. And somebody is back. We've missed her a lot. Our medium Maven, Sue O'Connell. Hello again, Jim.
So long. I thought she was a new guest.
Yeah.
She is favorite local woman, media maven Sue O'Connell, co-publisher of Bay Windows and the South End News, commentator and news influencer.
That's me. News influencer.
Yeah, tell me what that means.
Wow. I will.
And you can see her in the docuseries A Body in the Snow, The Trial of Karen Reed, streaming on Max and Discovery. Sue, great to see you.
Good to see you,
Thank
too.
you so
Thanks
much
for having
being
me
here.
back. I've been working on a multi-episode docu-series with Josh Kraft, interviewing him. Have you talked to him?
Funny.
Have you talked to him yet?
We have not. We have not talked to him
No, I think
yet.
you're missing the joke. Okay.
I get the joke. You're on TikTok talking about how he wouldn't come on the show. Jim was quite worked up about it.
You should be.
I've
You
gotten
should be.
over it
I'm worked
already.
up about it.
Yeah.
So.
What exactly is a news influencer in your case? What
So
does that mean?
I will tell you that one of the reasons that a lot of news people, professional journalists, are not on social media regularly is that we can't get paid individually by TikTok for being on. And a lot of people, if you see a clip on social media, it doesn't mean you go to the show, right?
Yeah.
It means you watch it.
Yeah.
So the value for networks and news professional organizations is, well, why are we doing this if we can't monetize it or it's not moving people to watch our shows?
Excellent point.
So we have decided that having a trusted voice on social media and then figuring out later how they're going to monetize it is what they're doing. So I'm doing commentary less than 2 minutes, under 2 minutes on commentary on TikTok and on Instagram. And over the period I've been doing it, I beat all the other NBC owned and operated stations.
Is that
Good
true?
for you.
So I'm going to keep doing it and hope you will watch my TikToks and my Instagrams and they'll figure out what to do about
And
the
is
business
it
side.
is at NBC Boston? Or what the hell is it?
Sue NBC Boston
Great,
is
Sue
my
NBC
handle.
Boston.
So
Okay.
watch and comment.
Okay.
Glad to see you.
Smash the like button.
Speaking of the documentary that you're on about the death of the former Boston police officer John O'Keefe,
Can I interrupt you and say that was fabulous? All of us lead with the woman who was accused of the killing, and no one ever leads with the fact that a police officer lost his life.
Yeah.
That was great.
You talked about that a lot too.
That was great.
And I also feel bad because he took over the care of his niece and nephew. I think it was niece and nephew after the parents died really young, and now they've lost him as well. But in any case, the judge has said no more delays. The Karen Reed trial is going to begin again in April. What's the latest?
Well, there's a lot latest, and from even my drive-in this morning to here has changed. So there is an appeal process going on for Karen Reed, and of course, this, like most big issues, is bigger than Karen Reed and John O'Keefe and what happened. You might recall that the jurors have said that were in the first trial that they were unanimous in believing she was not guilty of murder and not guilty of leaving the scene, and they were split on the manslaughter charge. They were not polled, they did not deliver a verdict, so therefore a mistrial was found, and then afterwards they reached out to the defense and reached out to the prosecution and said, why didn't anyone ask us? We didn't know that we weren't going to be asked. So Karen Reed's defense have appealed to the Supreme Judicial Court in Massachusetts, saying her double jeopardy right to avoid double jeopardy has been violated. They said, no, it isn't. They've appealed to a federal judge who said, no, it hasn't been, but they're appealing that now. And there is a sliver of hope for them that this next federal judge may think that her right to be free of double jeopardy has been violated. So Judge Beverly Cannoni has now called 1,500 jurors for week after next.
1,500?
1,500
I've never
to
heard
be
of that.
polled. The last time was 300, and it took 4 or 5 days to come in and be, to be interviewed to see if they can be jurors.
Wouldn't you love to be in this jury?
And,
I would.
No. And her
Why
argument
not?
is how, I can't delay the trial because I won't be able to get that many jurors again. So she said, to split the baby here, I won't swear in the jurors who have been picked, so therefore Karen Reed won't be in double jeopardy. So what happened today is now, and both the Commonwealth also asked for a delay on the trial as well. It was both. But today they are now again asking that the trial be delayed. They're asking the federal court because, each side is going to make their case based on what the charges are.
Yeah.
And if the murder charge goes away, it's a totally different case
Yes.
than if it's not just a manslaughter, but if there's no murder charge.
Can I say something? We've discussed this with other people, including you. I think Andrew Cabral. I'm not sure who else. I am convinced that legally, because they didn't poll the jury, that the charges stand and it's not double jeopardy. However, if this doesn't change court policy, if there are 3 charges against somebody, why would a judge not? I think they should be required to poll them on all the charges, not just say, as in this case, well, we didn't reach unanimity on all 3 of them. I mean, so while there's a clear, I think, an inequity in this thing, I don't think, based on my reading, it violates existing law. But is there any sense going forward that there's a move in the judiciary in Massachusetts to poll a jury on everything?
I think if this case ever ends, I think there's, and I'm not really kidding about it. I mean, if this case ever ends, I think that there's going to be a fresh look. I mean, one thing that Alan Jackson, Karen Reed's, one of her defense attorneys from Los Angeles, has done is come into our ancient courthouses and said, why are you doing it this way? You know, we had originally the courtroom they were going to be in, 4 of the jurors would not have been able to see the face of the witnesses. That has been that way for 100 years, and no one has complained
They have
about
air conditioning in the Norfolk courthouse yet?
Let's not even get started with the windows and the fans and the air conditioning. And the sheets that they are given are like copies of copies of copies of copies of copies of copies. They've been copying, you know, the same, basically probably using a mimeograph machine in the back. And in this, it's 2025.
Yeah.
You know, when we have, and he pointed out, Alan Jackson, how confusing the ballot, you know, the verdict slip was. So I think we need some fresh eyes to come in and look at how we've been doing things since 1640 and see if we want to change anything.
One other thing I know I've asked you before, but I actually have tried to watch some of this documentary stuff. I'm usually fast forwarding, looking for you. I'm embarrassed to admit, but that is what
That's what I do too.
I don't think I've ever seen a defendant in a murder case do interviews during the trial, or maybe, you know, one question thing. And so what's your analysis?
So here's what happened today.
Oh, okay.
There's more today. So Hank Brennan, who is the special prosecutor, there's also this continuing hearing with Aidan Kearney, Turtle Boy, who had a hearing yesterday, and
around witness
intimidation charges. And Hank Brennan is asking for his phones, Aidan's
Kearney's,
phones, to look at his correspondence with Karen, not necessarily regarding whether there was witness intimidation, which a federal grand jury did not indict her on, but if she admitted anything to him in a consciousness of guilt way. And he's also looking for, based on her appearances in this docuseries and in Dateline and in ABC's program, to say that they should be able to look at her correspondence with David Yannetti, her other defense attorney, saying that if she did these admissions before she actually hired him, they should be able to look at...
And there was no attorney-client privilege
exactly.
at the time.
So this case is just... I would not, I would not speak... If I were accused of a crime, I would not sit with as many documentarians as I did, she did.
Tell people, too, about Turtle Boy, because I think it's fair to say that without his advocacy, because he's on the side that she's not guilty, this would not have turned into this mega event, I don't think, where you have people in front of the courtroom with the Free Karen signs, and aren't everybody dressed in pink and all that kind of stuff?
No,
it's a big mob scene. And
it will happen again. I mean, I think that what you have here is this match made in heaven, if you will, of Karen Reed and Aidan Kearney. And Karen is exceptionally intelligent. And I think...
Is she still able to work, by the way, on this case?
I don't think
because she did work for Fidelity.
Yeah, she worked for Fidelity. I don't think she's been working.
Maybe not...
She's been working on the case. I mean, she's actually been, seated.
Income.
Yeah,
she's going to go work.
Well, I'm just wondering how you pay the bills.
She's raising money. She's raising money. People
okay.
donate to her and donate, and Aidan had been assisting in that as well. But the two of them together really came up with the viewpoint that this was a travesty and people needed to get involved. And, you know, I have recently, obviously at the court, seen Aidan, and I keep kind of joking with him that nothing about him has changed. He's the same person he was, the same blogger he was, the same member of the media he was 5 years ago, meaning that he can be misogynistic, he can be racist, he can be over-the-top hyperbole. And then there's a piece about him in The Atlantic this past issue.
We saw
and I say to him, you know, now what's going to happen is a bunch of progressive women are going to follow you thinking that you're, you know, a big hero towards women, and then you're going to break their hearts again. So
we had an adjective about the judge.
Yeah, just recently.
An adjective. I was a word that I will say almost anything. It is not a word that I ever say publicly.
It was a bad one.
So he, you know, when you don't have rules, when you're not working for a GBH or an NBC or a Boston Globe, and you're not concerned about being sued, and you're not concerned about being wrong, right? You can go out and dig these things up. And, you know, this is the second or third case that Aidan has been able to expose problems in the system, things that weren't working. But at the same time, there's a bunch of other stuff that he does, which I don't support in any way. But this is just
he stands accused of witness intimidation. Yes. Obviously, those are accusations, not indictments.
There is one last thing about this we should touch on. Well, the state police investigator has been fired, Trooper Michael Proctor. And what's that about?
Well, he was fired also because of an incident with alcohol and his cruiser, which is detailed in it. He was not called. He's not on the witness list for the prosecution, but he is on the witness list, I think, for the defense. How his firing will impact other cases that he's been involved in. I am shocked only that he got fired because of all the things that a lot of law enforcement do, and they never get fired.
But everybody knows about this.
Yes.
By the way, I just misspoke. By the way, when I said he hadn't been indicted, I meant he hadn't been convicted.
Been indicted. Yes,
I'm sorry.
he hasn't been convicted.
But isn't that what it's about? Because everybody knows. Everybody heard him read those grotesque, misogynistic texts in the trial.
Judge made him. And the point I keep making here too, which from just to broaden this conversation, is so many people. And I was talking to Jamie, our producer, about this. I know you've had equity and justice folks on talking about the court system. So many people who are accused of a crime end up with a plea bargain or end up settling the case in some way. And so many witnesses in crime, in courts, are bullied into testifying, are threatened in many ways by your kids are going to get taken away from you, or we're going to check your immigration status. And one of the reasons that this case is so compelling is because it forced us to see some of the bad behavior, poor police work, and just general not great work that got done by the Norfolk County DA's office, the police department. If she had they didn't offer her a plea, I don't know what the case, but if she had taken a plea, we would not know any of this.
Okay, that's all true, with one exception. I would say, this is not an accusation to NBC or anybody else, The Atlantic. If she were not a good-looking white woman, would there be this level of attention?
No,
the answer is absolutely not.
And every time I've said to some of her supporters, you are sharing some of the same ideals that Black Lives Matter are sharing, that you should be able to trust the police, that they shouldn't be profiling you, and they push back on me. But this is the same ideals of the basics of Black Lives Matter, that there's inequality and injustice in our system, and we trust, and the police need to be trained better on a local level.
Yeah, but the people who, just like I would say one more thing, because this is something I've spent part of my life looking at, and I'm sure people here have too, it's generally lower income defendants of color who are forced into those plea deals with crappy lawyers telling them, well, if you plead now, you'll be out in 4 years. If you don't plead and you're convicted, you're going to spend 22 years there without doing discovery, without doing adequate representation. And these mostly young men get totally screwed.
You know what's a great activity, though? I used to love covering trials. I think if you're retired or you're between jobs or something, to go sit in a courtroom and watch a murder trial is one of the, because you'll learn a lot of this stuff. You'll learn a lot of the missteps. You'll learn about the difficulties of both sides. Often the highly paid defense attorneys, out lawyer the prosecutors. The person is guilty, but the person is acquitted because the lawyering is better on one side. But it's just fascinating. There used to be this whole group at the Suffolk County Courthouse. These guys, it'd be about 6 or 8 of them, used to come. They watch every trial. They were the regulars. They knew all the court officers. They knew all the judges. I mean, it's really a civics lesson that's, I think, fascinating.
We were talking to a good friend of both of ours the other day about some of the trials you've covered.
Right.
For those unfamiliar, why don't you tell the audience about one in particular?
Oh,
we were talking about the overnight.
Jim likes this one.
Well, no, you covered it. I like it.
The ZD killer?
The ZD
Is that what
killer.
you're talking about? Yeah.
Tell us what the ZD killer was, yes.
Well, that was a terrible thing. The terrible
Why are you
thing.
laughing if it's a terrible
Because it was a
thing?
crazy headline. When I worked for the Boston Herald, we love these. We love these headlines on the front page. ZD killer. What happened is the wife cooked the ziti or boiled them too much or didn't boil them enough. And he did what any husband would do. He murdered her and put her heart and lungs on sticks in the backyard. And then he drove around the neighborhood. I think it was a nice town like Needham or Natick or something. Yeah. He drove around the neighborhood in the Toyota, covered in blood, with the poor little toddler in the back seat who was oblivious to this, thank God. Yeah. But the ZD killer,
I had a colleague who had a meeting with him a week before the murder.
No.
Yeah.
You're kidding?
Yeah, because she worked in a business making corporate videos, and the company he worked for, I think, was a medical.
Yeah, he had a good job.
Yeah, had a great job, and she actually met with him, and then of course, opened the Herald the next day or next week, and it's like, there he is. I guess I'm not getting that contract.
Yeah, there were so many great trials. Professor and the Prof, Made of Steel Won't Bend, the Klaus von Bülow trial. Oh, cool. Not to mention the Pam Smart trial up in New Hampshire. Not to mention O.J. Simpson out in California.
Well, I'm just spending my life
can't get
doing
any
Karen
better.
Reed. That's all I'm doing.
Karen Reed, it's a great trial.
Are you going every day?
I'm going to try to. This year in this trial, they're having a lottery, a once-a-week lottery. There's only 10 positions +2 pool allowed in the courtroom. And every Wednesday they're going to randomize. So there's a chance I may never get in.
Is there an
or
overflow?
I could get in every day. There's no overflow.
Really?
Yeah.
They should have an overflow courtroom.
They should.
They really should. You can see that the big jumbotron. They should put it right in front of the courthouse, actually,
That would be great.
so the people outside
You know,
can watch it too.
Can we make a ridiculous transition only because we felt we had to talk about this today? What do you think about Elon Musk being welcomed into the Pentagon today? Now, the New York Times story said last night, which of course Donald Trump says is untrue, which means absolutely nothing, that he was being briefed by Elon Musk briefed on potential war plans with China should that eventuality ever happen. And beyond the outrage of that on its merits, as Marjorie mentioned at the top of the show, he's got a ton of business in China. So the conflicts are through the... What was your reaction when you heard this thing?
Every single day I'm just gobsmacked about everything that's happening in Washington. And Elon Musk has... I just don't understand how someone with no... it's just all the basics that you would do to allow someone to be in a meeting. There's no vetting. His conflicts are unbelievable. You know, the fact that he is thinking that this just 10% off the top of all the budgets is a great way to cut, I'm using air quotes, fraud, when, basically his entire business has been built on tax breaks and contracts from the government and all sorts of things that he would not have if it weren't for our tax dollars, right? And, what does China think about this? I mean, I know we look at it from the American standpoint, but this could be they could view this as a massive threat, allowing him to see this and see these war plans. And plus we know, Trump can't keep his mouth shut, right? So I'm speechless because it's every day I'm just gobsmacked.
I think we would echo those sentiments. You want to say something?
No, I was just going to say that Jamie looked up the ZD killer.
What happened?
He was convicted in 1996 of...
That was that long ago?
It was, yeah.
Richard Rosenthal.
Rosenthal, yeah. Apparently, it wasn't that she'd overboiled or underboiled.
what was it?
She burned the ZD.
Well, it's overcooking it.
That was the problem.
Okay.
Anyway, okay, so let's... do we have time for something else?
We do,
or are we out of
do,
time?
yeah. No, we haven't.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about this. People, after the Trump election, people that were very upset about people changing their media habits because of this. Either some people not watching anything, some people watching more. Have you looked at this at NBC News Boston? What do you
Can I
think?
put this in context first?
Yes.
Because what we were talking about this morning is the first Trump, there was a Trump bump. There was a huge, anytime Trump appeared anywhere, there were huge ratings increases for cable or wherever else. And now, following up on Marjorie said, there's a feeling that a large part of the ordinarily news-consuming public, there's a Trump slump. People just can't handle it anymore. What are you saying?
No, I think that's absolutely true. And from sort of anecdotally talking to people, and they say, I used to watch you or listen to you, or I check in every day, and I can't now because I can't take it. And the problem is, of course, now more than ever, people need to be connected to the news and see what's happening and looking at trusted sources and making their own decisions about information that they get that's based on facts. And at the same time, our challenge, right, is you go into we have meetings 3 times a day to choose what we're going to put on our air, and everybody else does as well. And every single story is a Trump-related story,
incredible.
right? And they're all very important. And one of them 10 years ago about a president would be our lead breaking story, but they're one of 20. And of course, for a local station, we're looking at what's the local impact. So how are parents of kids with special needs reacting to Trump trying to eliminate the Department of Education? Well, is that any more or less important than the president, perhaps ignoring a federal court order and what will happen there, and about folks on the street getting rounded up and basically being kidnapped? It's not deportation, it's kidnapping when you don't have any due process.
So how do you make that? Assuming that a handful of stories and almost everything he's doing has some impact on people in Massachusetts or New England, which is our audience, what do you do? Give less coverage to more things, or focus on the one
Yeah.
or two things that you editorially decide.
we debate it all the time.
We do every day.
It's an everyday decision. And of course, local television news is driven by what's happening today and what's happening right now. So the good news is that those drive us, whatever is happening locally today. Celtics being, purchased is a big deal, so that's obviously going to help. But you're always trying to also do a balance, which you do too. You got broccoli, and then you got ice cream, right? So you have to make sure that folks are wanting to watch the news or have it on and getting a balanced meal of what we're offering. But it's a challenge, I'll tell you, because I remember you had Joe Biden as president, and sometimes a week went by.
Yeah.
Marjorie said
Never
this all
even
the time,
mentioned
yeah.
Joe
Never.
Biden. The whole day went by. You didn't have any federal news. Things were just going ahead, and it's astonishing what's happening now.
So speaking of local, can we go ultra local before you leave us? Since we haven't seen you in a bunch of weeks, how are things on the coyote front? I mean, what?
Well, it
what
is
is
coyote. It is coyote mating
Yeah,
season,
watch
as
out.
many of you know.
Yeah.
And I have not seen. Maud has still been getting her
Maud
long
would
walks
be the dog.
every morning.
Yeah.
And so we have not seen any coyotes in the Fort Hill neighborhood.
Good.
I have been warning my new neighbors. I've been trying not to be that person, but we have a couple of people let their dog off the leash or their little
no.
dog, and I'm like, there's coyotes. Well, we haven't seen any. I'm like, okay, good for you. But no coyotes lately. The turkeys, however. Turkeys are on the march.
They're mating too.
They're
right?
mating too.
Everyone's
You know what I
mating.
didn't tell you?
Everyone's
Canada
mating but
geese
me.
are mating.
Everyone is mating but me.
You know what I didn't tell I don't think that was a question, but thank you for sharing that with us. You know what I didn't tell you, especially since you used to have a
What?
little tiny dog? How much does your dog weigh?
26 pounds.
Okay, my older daughter moved with her husband to a place called Red Hook, New York, which is like near Rhinebeck, and that not
Red
Brooklyn.
Hook?
No, not
Oh,
Brooklyn.
okay.
Red Hook, it's its own little place near Albany, Rhinebeck. They have a big backyard, and they're eagles. They're bald eagles back there.
Yeah. No,
Their
that
dog,
happened to a friend of mine.
It was a fabulous dog,
Yeah.
weighs 16 pounds.
Yeah.
The eagle, I didn't tell you
you
this.
can't do
the
it.
eagle
No.
came down last week and picked up a beaver,
Yeah.
which they say probably
No.
weighed 40 pounds, and flew away with the damn beaver.
We had a story here not long ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago, of a dog that was picked up by a hawk
Oh, my
and
God.
dropped a mile.
Dead
he
or
lived.
not?
No, he lived and dropped like a mile away. I used to have a little
Can
terrier.
you imagine seeing your dog flying
my
away in the
God.
claws of an
there's
eagle or
nothing
a
quite.
hawk?
I had a terrier and it had one of those retractable leashes, and it was walking in the woods once, and it was a far ahead of me, and I saw the hawk coming down, and I was like, no.
Can I end this with something that's on CNN
What?
right now? Here's a poll question. Deporting immigrants living in the U.S. illegally, a mere 63, which is huge. I'm being facetious. 63 to 35. Now, I know what you're going to say.
I am gonna
What
say
does
it.
it mean? Who are they talking about?
They're
the
talking-
fact that people can read these stories, they can
Yes.
see about Mahmoud Khalil, who did nothing wrong, that advocate for a people he supports.
But they're
63 to
lying
35?
about him and saying he's a pro-Hamas guy. That has not been
So
proven.
63%
They're lying.
of
What did
people
they
have-
say about Wu? That she was protecting criminal, illegal, and she's not. They
63% of the people think this is all perfect?
I think that they think they're getting rid of criminals.
Listen, the guy whose wife got deported, or his girlfriend, his fiance
know.
got
I
deported,
know.
who voted for Trump,
know.
is still saying,
I
no,
know.
it's a good
I
thing.
know.
She, just because he didn't think because she was
You know
here
why?
undocumented.
You know why? Because she burnt the ziti. That's why.
That's right. Do not burn the CD. That is the lesson
there's
coming
that
out of
old
this
joke
segment.
that Congressman Stephen Lynch tells at the St. Patrick's Day breakfast
What's
every
that?
year.
What
It's like
does
there's
he
a
say?
crackdown on immigrants, and I just want to let you know that my mother-in-law, who is here, perhaps maybe undocumented, I don't want you to come for her. And her address is 32 West Broadway, South Boston. So that's
Yeah.
a Stephen Lynch classic. So
Okay.
Sue, we've really missed
thank
you.
you.
It's
I'm back.
fabulous to
Thank
see
Thank you
Sue
very much
O'Connell.
to our O'Connell, our beloved media maven, our very favorite local
Thank
woman.
you.
Sue O'Connell is co-publisher of Bay Windows and South End News, commentator and news influencer at NBC Boston. You can catch her in the docu-series A Body in the Snow, The Trial of Karen Reed. It's on Max. You can stream it there or on Discovery ID. Is that what we call it now? Discovery ID. Okay. Sue, thank you very much. After a quick break, we're going to speak with retired federal judge Nancy Gertner, and we're going to ask her whether the courts will be able to prevent some of the extreme actions of President Donald Trump or not. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
A few years ago, the Belgian singer Tamino left his home country to settle in New York.
Leaving behind a place, a relationship, maybe even a belief system.
So he channeled that change and loss into a new album.
Tell me again that you miss me.
I'm Mary Louise Kelly. That story on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And the Bach Center, presenting Riverdance 30, The New Generation, a special anniversary tour, playing April 8th through the 13th at the Bach Center Wang Theater. Tickets at bachcenter.org. And Brookmeadow at Cobb Corner, an assisted living community offering wellness, care, and support services, including an on-site exercise physiologist to help seniors stay physically active. More at brookmeadowslr.com. And the Boston Speakers Series, announcing its upcoming season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings, including Dr. Anthony Fauci, Ken Burns, outlier author Malcolm Gladwell, and geopolitical economist Pippa Malmgren. bostonspeakers.org. And Gentle Giant Moving and Storage Company, employing athletes since 1980 and currently hiring to join their team. Gentle Giant is an equal opportunity employer. More at gentlegiant.com/careers.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan live at the Boston Public Library, streaming youtube.com/GBH News. Before we introduce former Judge Gertner, I just want to say a lawyer friend of ours who's a very prominent lawyer in town doesn't want to be identified. We were talking about the jurors not being polled. He mentioned the fact that the lawyer for Karen Reed could have requested that the jurors be polled on the 3 charges, and he did not. So
is that your defense attorney?
Is that the person who texted me?
Yeah.
No, it's somebody else.
Okay.
In any case, for the latest iteration of On the Docket, we are joined on Zoom by retired federal judge Nancy Gertner. Judge Gertner is a senior lecturer at Harvard Law School and a BPR contributor. Judge Gertner, it's good to see you.
Good to be here.
Judge, you wrote a great piece about the impeachment threat against judges and coming from the White House, and I love that in the middle of the story you quoted Dan Bongino, longtime podcaster, very popular podcaster, who's now the FBI deputy director, and said Trump should, quote unquote, ignore court decisions that he disagrees with. So this is what we're facing. What'd you say in that piece?
Well, I was talking essentially about the accusation, the threat to impeach judges was preposterous. When you think about it, when you step back from it, Trump was not impeached for basically starting an insurrection, for manipulating Zelensky for political advantage. That was not enough. And the notion then that these judges who are essentially just raising issues that, just following the law, that they should be impeached is just preposterous. And all that it's doing is vitriol. All it's doing is fueling what is a really serious problem, which is threats against judges. I also wanted to make it clear that if Trump begins to violate or not follow the rules, then we will be in a different place. I highlighted something that was in Justice Roberts's comment, not the most recent comment, but at the end of December, he issued a statement on the state of the courts, in which he was chastising people for criticizing the court. And I actually was concerned about that because I criticize the court. I don't necessarily say the court should be ignored. This is the Supreme Court, but I certainly criticized Justice Cannon on your show. And he had a line in there that says it's especially irresponsible for criticizing the court when that criticism comes from public figures. And of course, that's essentially what the impeachment move is. It's public figures saying that we believe that these people should be gone. So that it was irresponsible, it had no basis, and was worse coming from people who should know better. That was the gist of what I said.
Judge Gertner, I know Marjorie asked you about the threats a couple times ago when you were here, but we've talked, and there's proof of this, that threats have caused corporate executives, some, to change their behavior. threats have clearly caused members of Congress, many members of Congress, to change their behavior. Chuck Todd told us yesterday he was convinced that reporters were self-censoring because of threats to their employers and implicit threats, I guess, I'm putting words in his mouth there, to them. Why should we assume, or should we, that not judges across the board, but individual judges may not be changing their behavior for fear of being targeted by Trump or any of his MAGA people?
Well, you haven't seen it yet.
How do we know? How do we know?
Well, because the overwhelming number of requests for emergency relief against Trump have been granted. So what, is over 100 lawsuits have been filed?
Yeah.
The overwhelming majority of requests for emergency relief, temporary restraining orders, and even preliminary injunctions have been granted. And as I've said on this program before, that's because what Trump is trying to do is not subtle. The distance between what he's trying to do and what is lawful is enormous. And so I think I said here that you don't have to be a liberal judge to say this is unlawful. You only have to be alive. And I think that's right. I think that what you're seeing, the judges tempering their positions because of fear, you might see in subsequent rounds. These are temporary emergency restraining orders, so that maybe you may see it elsewhere. But you certainly didn't see it in the immediate response to the Trump coup. And I say that without hesitation.
What is use that word, we were going to ask you later, but since you did, what of his behaviors is most coup-like to you, Judge Gertner?
Well, I mean, it's taking over institutions over which the government, a president is not supposed to have that kind of power. Taking over the executive, not in the way that is respectful of the existing institutions, but taking them over so that they can bend to his will. And then now intimidating the court, trying to intimidate the court. It hasn't been successful, but trying to intimidate the court, frankly, in the way that Orban did in Hungary.
Yeah.
Sort of getting the court to getting the court to back down. And I said, you haven't seen that yet, much to the extraordinary credit of the bench. But you may see judges tempering their decisions as we go down the line because of the threats. We haven't seen it yet, and that's extraordinary.
I'm sorry.
No, go on.
I was just going to say, Heather Cox Richardson, she's a historian up at Boston College, writes a Substack column, which is very popular. She had one today talking about what we're talking about. And she mentioned Stephen Levitsky and Daniel Ziblatt, who wrote a book called How Democracies Die. We had them both on the show at different times. And she quoted they're talking about this so-called coup. And Levitsky said he looked at cases like Hungary, like you mentioned, and like Poland and Turkey. And he said that in a lot of respects, what's going on now is worse in terms of our sliding from a democracy into an authoritarian country. And in the same Richardson column, it talked about two very big legal scholars writing op-eds, one in the New York Times and Washington Post, wondering whether the courts will be able to stop Donald Trump, particularly if some of those judges were appointed by Trump.
Well, as I said, so far, you have to put this in context. What he's doing is so illegal, right? Freezing funds when only Congress has the authority to do that. Dismantling agencies when this is something that Congress has the right to do. Even in a space in which a president has extraordinary authority, which is the deportation space, immigration, national security, he could have done it lawfully, but he's chosen not to do it lawfully. So what he's done has been so far from lawful, constitutional, legitimate, that a judge, being a judge, would have to say this is wrong. If there now are consequences to those judges, in other words, threats to those judges, that could affect the next round of judges who will then not be as courageous. So I think that right now the courts have been holding. But I think, as Steve Vladeck wrote in the New York Times yesterday, that's not enough. People can't count on the courts in this situation. People have to reflect their anger at Trump in what they do every day. in what they say to their representatives and senators, and demonstrate.
Yeah, that's one. Is that the piece that said it's up to the people and it's up to Congress to really do this? We shouldn't leave it all up to the courts. But I would dying to ask you about this. I asked this to somebody.
Well, you're
before.
not leaving this topic, are
No,
you?
I'm not.
Okay.
I mean, so many people have said what the president is doing is illegal, but I wondered, the Supreme Court has granted the president immunity in his official duties as the president. So I wonder if it matters if what he does is illegal, because John Roberts' court has given him a free pass to do illegal things.
Well, it's given him immunity from a criminal prosecution, right? He can't be prosecuted criminally for those things that are core official acts. But that doesn't mean that when a judge says, that you can't deport this person because there was no due process, that has nothing to do with criminal prosecution of Trump. That has to do with that person's rights. So the two are unrelated. Now, he may well feel emboldened to do what he's doing because he thinks he has a sympathetic Supreme Court. But bear in mind, what Justice Roberts said 2 days ago was actually extraordinary. He had no obligation to speak. This is Justice Roberts. Justice Robertson made it clear that the threat of impeaching judges is something we don't do in this country. You can disagree, you can appeal, but we don't use the impeachment tool to deal with things with which we just disagree. You don't like what the judge said, and you can't, and that's not the subject of impeachment. But again, you have to distinguish between what's going on around the country is Trump lays down a marker. He wants to do X. X violates the Constitution. And all the judges are doing is saying X violates the Constitution.
Yeah. If I might, though, about this whole issue of you were answering Margie's question. She asked it about whether or not we can trust the courts to do the right thing. How about trusting the defendant to do the right thing? I mean, the line that is really overused but is perfectly on point, it was President Jackson, I hope, who in that Cherokee land rights case said, John Marshall, the Supreme Court, has made his decision, now let him enforce it. It's clear to me, despite what he said to Laura Ingraham the other day, that of course I would never defy a court order. I, as a former lawyer, think he's already violating court orders in a number of cases, including the deportation of those Venezuelans when he ordered the plane turns around planes, and he didn't. So when he decides, if the Supreme Court rules against him on X, that he's just not going to comply with the order. I mean, even Richard Nixon turned over the tapes. What happens next?
I can't say everybody's been asking.
I know. It's a pretty big one.
First of all, it's not clear, by the way, that Andrew Jackson said that. That's just a minor point. That historically, it's not clear that.
Well, I just said it then. That's
there
close enough. Yeah, okay.
Good, well,
many millions have quoted Jim on that.
What we have seen is something. What he's doing is, he reminds me. There's a poor analogy, but he reminds me of like the 11-year-old, and you say go to bed at this time. Not an 8-year-old. You say go to bed, and he says, "Give me 2 more minutes." Give me 3 more minutes.
Yeah.
And he starts walking to the bedroom at a pace that would get him to the bedroom by the next morning. I mean, so right now, what you can see is they are indulging the court. They are playing chicken. They are saying, oh, we didn't really do that. We're not, we didn't hear you. You said stop the planes. I'm sorry. Can you say it again? I didn't hear you. And so right now they're playing chicken with those orders, and courts are having to come back and say, this is what I said, this is the line in the stand, you have to do it. Let me go back to the Venezuelan case.
Yes, this is Judge Boasberg. Yes, Boasberg, thank you.
In many of these cases of what Trump has been doing since January 20th, there was a lawful way to do that, particularly for a president that has all of the levers of power. Congress, right. The executive. And there was a lawful way for him to do it, and he chose not to do that. He chose not to go to Congress and say, take down, dismantle the Department of Education. He has Congress. Mm-hmm. He chose not to go to Congress and say, freeze these funds. He had that authority. Instead, he wanted to simply flex his muscles and effectively demean the other branches. The same thing with respect to these deportations. There was a lawful way to proceed in an area in which the president already has considerable power, in which judges defer to the executive. And instead, he's choosing not to go through the lawful way. And again, I think it's simply flexing his muscles and saying, in your face, courts. The Alien Enemies Act, which is the authority that he was going to proceed with the Venezuelans, is a little bit more complicated because, in fact, there are very, very substantial constitutional and statutory challenges to whether it is appropriate to use it for a Venezuelan gang as opposed to a country that is at war with us, which is the way it's been used in previous situations. But still, if they had made the case to a judge in the way, instead of playing chicken, made it the way other administrations have done, who knows what the result will be? I would think it actually would not likely to succeed. But instead, he's playing chicken with the courts, and he's, for the sole purpose, as with the freeze and with the dismantling agencies, of flexing his muscles. I'm the judge. I mean, I'm the king.
We're talking to a retired federal judge. I'm sorry, Nancy Gertner. My apologies.
So what happens now? I guess the Judge Boasberg has given the administration until March 25th to explain why it didn't return these flights with the Venezuelan gang members, although it was supposedly at least one of them. We're not sure if he even is a member of this Venezuelan gang, so that's a little disturbing. Didn't get due process, but in any case, assuming that most of them are, why they didn't return the flights back. So now, say it's March 20th, so he has 21st, so he's got 4 more days. So suppose the 25th comes and they still say, we're not telling you. I mean, that's what they've been saying to date, right? We're not giving you the information.
But let's sort of run this two paths here. He wants to argue that the Alien Enemies Act, which applies usually to invasion by hostile countries, applies to a Venezuelan gang ostensibly unaffiliated with a country.
Correct.
So there was a legal argument about whether this applies at all to these people. Then there's a due process question, which is, even if it applies to these people as a group, does it apply to every individual in it? Recall, after 9/11, during the Guantanamo litigation, individuals were able to go to court to test the legitimacy of their own detention, right? We had individuals come forward, and the government was respectful of that, and it was litigated in court. So that's been the pattern, even with respect to, even when you have enormous power in this zone, even when a president has enormous power. So again, it underscores that he's essentially thumbing his nose at the courts. He's thumbing his nose. There's a lawful way to do this, a principled way to do this, and then what he's doing, which is thumbing his nose. If he takes the final step, an order issues, and he says nuts to you, everybody says we're in a constitutional crisis, then the judge has to move for contempt, has to, haul in the officials who were responsible for that order. Civil contempt would mean they can send them to jail till they comply. We're at a point we've never been in our country, seriously never been. So when people ask me what then, we exhaust every lawful means we know, and then if that doesn't work, people have to express their opposition by demonstrating, by striking, by all the ways in which political opposition is demonstrated.
At least in other countries. Now, Judge Gertner, I always try to work myself into a frenzy before the 1 o'clock news. So if we can revisit something Marjorie just touched upon, the 11 o'clock hour. Before your judicial career, you were a part of a law firm, and you were a spectacular practicing lawyer. One of the most prominent firms in America is Paul Weiss Rifkin. Trump went after them with an executive order you can tell us about. And the word capitulation, I don't think, is nearly strong enough to describe what they did. Could you describe the facts and then give us your reaction to this $40 million fund they've agreed to create at the president's request?
Trump named a number of law firms as he was targeting a number of law firms. I think he was targeting their DEI policies. Mm-hmm. Pause for a second. just the laws of prohibiting discrimination against protected groups are still in place. And law firms that take steps to make sure that they're not violating those laws are not doing anything illegal. The debate is confusing quotas for let me make sure that the circle of opportunity includes as many different kinds of people as possible. That is completely lawful, even under his definition. So he targeted a number of firms for their supposed illegal DEI policies. In the case of three of the firms, Perkins Coie and Covington and Burling, I've forgotten the third one, he literally took steps to withdraw security clearances of lawyers that were there, and also denied them access to federal buildings. Perkins Coie sued, mobilizing a huge number of the legal profession, saying, you don't have a right to do this. If you think we're doing something wrong, you go against us in a case in court. You don't bar access before anything is litigated. You don't do that. Again, there was a right way to do this and a wrong way to do this. If you thought this was discrimination, sue us for discrimination. You do not do the way you're doing it. Again, just for the purpose of flexing his muscles. Paul Weiss did something different. Paul Weiss yesterday decided that they would identify about $40 million, I think it was, for pro bono projects that would be bipartisan. Who knows what that means? And they would say they're not, and that would get them off the list.
Right.
Trump's list.
Well, can I define what bipartisan means?
And they threw the partner.
Before we get to that, you get to say the $40 million is for a fund to represent causes that Trump champions, and that's the way they would allegedly be bipartisan in their behavior. $40 million of representation to Trump's friends. I mean, I've never heard anything like this in my life.
I've never heard anything like this in my life either. I'm actually horrified. I don't have the verbs to describe this. Paul Weiss was a firm that had a very storied history. It was one of the firms that allowed in Jewish lawyers when other firms did not. That in fact was founded by Jewish lawyers. This is a degree of capitulation that we have only seen in countries that are really on the road to totalitarianism. Well, I don't say those things lightly. I've been on your program a great deal, and I have resisted talking in apocalyptic terms, but I'm turning the corner on that.
Well, he went after Boston law firms, too, including Ropes & Gray, one of the most famous, prestigious law firms in Boston, demanding the names and addresses and phone numbers and email addresses.
And grade point averages.
And grade point average, that's right, of attorneys there and how they were hired and who they were and all this kind of stuff. So what does Ropes & Gray do?
So far, again, there was a lawful way to do things and an unlawful way. So the EEOC, the new commissioner, the head of the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, made a list of numbers of firms and then demanded the kind of information you just described. This is completely unlawful. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission can't bring charges against people without a basis. And they had no basis. There was also an individual. It has to be voted on by the commission. They didn't follow any of the procedures. In any event, what they're asking for is protected by the privilege. Again, there may be a lawful way and an unlawful way, and Trump, to flex his muscles, keeps on choosing the unlawful way. And that should chill all of us.
But people are capitulating to the unlawful way.
Well, so far, Paul Weiss has capitulated.
Yeah.
The other firms on that list have not, I believe. But it's one of my students at Harvard was working for a major firm. She was the student. Her name is Rachel Cohn. She organized the associates letter to encourage, associates all around the country, associates in big firms, to encourage them to pressure their firms to stand up to Trump's illegal requests. So a young woman who has much more to lose is more courageous than these big firms who are making cajillions of dollars.
Yeah, that's what I wondered. Why did Paul Weiss do it? They would obviously stand to lose a lot of money. But to even throw a former partner under the bus and say he was guilty of wrongdoing when the partner himself, Attorney Palmer, said, I was guilty of no wrongdoing.
What did he do that was alleged wrongdoing?
He was one of the prosecutors in the Manhattan election interference case that Trump...
He was the person who resigned when it was clear that Vance was not going to bring charges against Trump. But this is called political opposition, and we consider that lawful. Let me just say that my student, who wrote the letter, has just resigned from Skadden.
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I mean, she's an example of someone who is being courageous in the face of really. I mean, you've said this. This is not normal. This is not anything we've ever seen in the United States. This is the kind of stuff that happens in countries that are well on the road to totalitarianism. You can't take these small steps and say they don't matter when they do.
By the way, we're out of time, but we're getting a ton of texts saying you're siding with the Venezuelan gang members. What we're siding with is the Constitution. And I would hope everybody would side with the Constitution. And as Judge Gertner said, had the administration filed proper protocol, they could have had the exact same result, but they chose to do it in a constitutionally violated way.
Let me say one more thing in
30 seconds.
Yeah.
Please.
After 9/11, when there was enormous pressure to deal with, getting rid of and prosecuting people who are supposedly involved in terrorism, the administration followed the rules. Yeah. There were habeas corpus cases. There were conditions cases at Guantanamo. We followed the rules and accomplished that. That's all that we're saying now. You just don't throw out the rules, when it suits you.
Judge Gertner, as always,
thank you, Judge
really
Gertner, very much.
Time.
That used to be the slogan. Remember, we were a country of laws, not men. But I think that's gone out the window
now
too.
We're a country of man.
Yeah, one man. We were speaking with retired federal judge Nancy Gertner. After the 1:00 news.
Committed to lifelong learning, and the Beacon Circle shares that commitment with gifts of $2,400 or more. It's one big way to help keep our community informed and connected. Learn more at gbh.org/Beacon Circle.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Seasons 4, the outdoor living store in Lexington, featuring over 100 styles of outdoor furniture delivered throughout New England, plus a wide selection of plants, statuary, and garden accessories. Spring events now in progress. Seasons4.com. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, ranked #1 in member satisfaction among commercial health plans in Massachusetts by J.D. Power for the second consecutive year. Details at mgbhp.org/everyday.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Trump says if there were U.S. war plans for China, he wouldn't show it to anyone, including his Doge architect, Elon Musk.
Certainly you wouldn't show it to a businessman who is helping us so much. He's a great patriot. He's paying a big price for helping us cut costs, and he's doing a great job. He's finding tremendous waste, fraud, and abuse. But I certainly wouldn't want, Elon has businesses in China, and he would be susceptible perhaps to that.
At the White House a short time ago, Trump disputed news reports that Musk was going to take part in a Pentagon briefing today on military plans involving China. This morning, a U.S. official not authorized to speak publicly told NPR that Musk had been expected to attend a high-security briefing to be attended virtually as well by the head of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, which includes China. However, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said Musk was in his office for informal talks about efficiencies and smarter production. Israel's defense minister, Israel Katz, says that Israel will annex parts of Gaza, warning Hamas that the longer it does not release hostages, the more territory Israel will take. That's as Israel has continued airstrikes there since it broke the ceasefire earlier this week. More from NPR's Kat Lohnsdorf.
In a statement, Katz said that the Israeli military will be intensifying the fighting until the hostages are freed. He said he had instructed troops to, quote, seize additional territory in Gaza while evacuating the population, and that Israel would annex more and more land until Hamas agrees to the demands. More than 550 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza since the ceasefire was broken, including hundreds of children, according to health officials there. 36-year-old Rami Fayez Abu Nasser helped pull his young brother from the rubble after their home in the north was hit in a strike. He talked to NPR's Anas Baba from a hospital. The war is back and it's stronger than before, he said. Kat Lohnsdorf, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
The entire state of Vermont has 11 programs that offer daytime care for older adults and respite for caregivers. Vermont Public's Nina Keck reports program administrators warn potential cuts to Medicaid could mean even fewer options.
Vermont has an estimated 70,000 unpaid family caregivers. 50-year-old Nikki Juvan is one of them. Her husband has had several strokes, and she says an adult day program he attends in Middlebury has been a lifesaver.
It meant that I could go to work and continue to do my job, knowing that he was being taken care of, and also, that he was being engaged with other people.
Medicaid helps pay the cost, and Juvan worries that lawmakers in Washington will cut funding to these programs.
That's NPR's Nina Keck reporting. At last check on Wall Street, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was down 39 points at 41,913. This is NPR.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. 3 Boston high schools and 1 elementary school are now set to close at the end of the next school year, while 2 other schools will merge. Last night, the Boston School Committee voted 5-1 to close Dever Elementary School, Mary Lyon Pilot High School, and Excel High School. BPS administrators say the buildings are unable to offer a full range of services like special ed. The closure of the Dever School in particular has been controversial. Parent Cheryl Buckman, who spent months protesting the plan, was hoping more school committee members would object.
Listening to them seemed like the hope of saving the school turned into shattered dreams. I lost my composure in front of the computer. I had to walk away because I knew there that my son had lost his support system.
Advocates have criticized the closures as disproportionately affecting low-income and higher-need students. A new bridge is being proposed on I-95 to replace the nearly 1,400-foot-long bridge that's essential for connecting Cape Cod to New Bedford and Providence. The Standard Times reports that the new bridge would stretch from County Street to the northern Route 18, extending to the eastern side of the highway. The project aims to maintain smooth commercial traffic. The bridge is set to be built within the next 6 years, with an estimated cost of some $400 million. In the forecast, rain ends. We may see a little bit of sunshine this afternoon, high in the mid to upper 40s, clearing sky overnight tonight, sun clouds, and near 60 tomorrow. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher's dedicated team of specialists provide resources on investing, retirement income, estate planning, and more. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
Jason Browdy, I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. Thank you. Wow. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Sorry, I'm trying to see Callie over my computer screen.
Oh. Is that it?
Yeah, hello.
Oh, good. Hello to you then, too.
Good to see you.
How's that working out, seeing
Well,
Kelly over your
I'm
computer
over in the
screen?
corner, so I can see her
fine.
now.
All right.
Okay.
Hi, Kelly. I see you from here. I can even see Adam. It's amazing. Time for our weekly media segment called Press Play. With us this week at the interview desk are GBH's Kelly Crossey, who Marjorie can now see. She's host of Under the Radar with Kelly Crossey. You can catch that Sunday nights right here on 89.7 at 6. You can also hear Kelly commentaries on Mondays for GBH's Morning Edition. Also co-host for GBH's Culture Show, airs daily 2 o'clock right here on 89.7. And most importantly, their Weekend Review thing, which is Fridays, is live right here at the library. So if you're here, don't leave. And if you're not here, show up. Also here is GBH politics reporter Adam Riley, previously host of GBH's Two's Talking Politics. Welcome to you both. Good to see you.
Hello.
Hey, guys.
Hi.
Hi, thank you both for coming in. So, Kelly, let's start with you. The Trump administration has shuttered a lot of these federal agencies, or half wiped them out. He's doing trying to wipe out a good chunk of the Department of Education now today. Among those agencies is the Voice of America, which started back in World War II to try to combat Nazi propaganda. Then it was the shortwave radio. Remember the shortwave radio? But anyway, it's pretty much going to be gone now. So, what do you think?
Well, I think that most people don't know what it is or how it operates. Right. And so to begin with, there's probably not a lot of people responding to it with any kind of either outrage or concern because they just don't understand its role. So the Voice of America, as you said, when it got started, was to combat misinformation and to do essentially what our journalists do in this country, but in a place, and two countries where most people are living under authoritarian control. So they, hear a story and it's shaped by the authoritarian government. That means that's not what's really going on. And here is the only voice that so many people have referred to over these years as a place that they knew that they could find out what really happened. I don't need to say the historians have said that the first thing that authoritarian governments do is to take over the media.
Yeah.
That's the first thing because they want to be able to control the message. So this was one space representing the United States internationally that was combating that. It's also a media outlet and a journalistic media outlet. So performing the same way as Adam will pick up in a minute that our journalists do was annoying to President Trump and some of his supporters who've been pushing back loudly against what they believe is unfair coverage.
I don't know which is worse, Adam. I assumed when he picked Kari Lake, who is the election-denying former two-time failed candidate for office in Georgia and Senate in Arizona to run this whole thing, that one of two things is going to happen. Either kill it, which is what they've done, or just staff it with like Fox News types who will continue our mission around the world, just not tell the truth about what's really happening. Why do you think he chose this route rather than having a megaphone around the world? Not that I guess he needs it for his own, quote, news.
The statement that Kari Lake put out said something like, I'm not going to get the exact phrase right, but it was along the lines of, there is insurmountable rot at Radio Free Europe and these affiliated networks. They may have decided that it simply was too big a job to try to remake it. It also costs money to remake it, right? And Elon Musk has been pushing for this to be cut. He says it's just a way to burn through $1 billion in taxpayer money inappropriately. There's also a punitive element here, I think. Mm-hmm. Some of the things that the White House put out a statement after the executive order that amounts to the shuttering of Radio Free Europe and these affiliate networks. And their sins include, as detailed by the White House, covering the idea of white privilege, doing a story about transgender migrants seeking asylum in the U.S., covering Joe Biden too favorably, President Trump not favorably enough, a biggie, of course, and staffers making negative posts about Trump on their private social media, which is something that...
Well, that's a problem.
That is a problem.
That is a problem. That is a problem.
And we're both saying that so people can hear that.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. That should not be happening.
Jason resigned.
I want to do two. Make one point.
Sure.
Initially, Kari Lake said this is not a good thing to do. So I just want to put that on the table.
Shutting it down is not a good thing.
Yes, saying, let's not do this. And then she sort of got with the program as they pressured her.
Yeah, Jason resigned. He was in Iran, I believe.
Iran.
Yeah, he was imprisoned there in Iran. He's a journalist for the Washington Post. He mentioned that there are 10 jailed journalists who work for some of these United States outlets who are still in jail. Several of them are in Vietnam, and some of them are serving as long as 15 years for basically being reporters. And he urged, basically said, we can't forget, we have a responsibility toward these journalists to get them out.
They were contributors to the service. I just want to make that connection for folks. So they're left hanging out there.
They're left, and you wonder, are we just going to forget about them now?
You know what they have in common besides doing that? Most of them are non-United States citizens, and I think it's fairly clear we're going to do nothing for
I think that's the smart money.
Definitely.
And in that way, it kind of reminds me of the fixers that helped so many of our people during the Afghanistan, and then we are still struggling to get some of them in a protective state that we promised them for their help. By the way, let's just note, we don't know how it's going to turn out, but Steve Kappas, who is the leading, the head person at VOA, is sued. So
good.
But
But
the problem
that's a process.
is, even when you win those suits, this gets back to what I've been saying every day. Not that it's unique to me, that he wins even if he loses. Being Trump, USAID broke the law. Well, everything's dissolved. So what can you do about it anymore? Same situation here. If it turns out they say the closing of Voice of America was unconstitutionally done, what happens other than a finding that it was unconstitutionally done? Can we move to what my latest obsession is? I get stuck like a little kid, as Marjorie knows. Here's my sticking of this week, is how do we know that the mainstream media, and I mean that in the best sense of the word, I don't mean it in the pejorative way that critics say, the best of the press, the Washington Post, the New York Times, etc. How do we know the reporters are not self-censoring? We talked the other day with Marty Barron, former editor of the Globe and the Washington Post, and we were talking about the case of Ruth Marcus, who resigned after 41 years when they spiked her column criticizing mildly Bezos for saying, here's what our editorials are going to do. She admitted, which I think takes a lot of courage, in the long piece she wrote in the New Yorker, that I shouldn't use this word, I self-censored myself in this op-ed and another one, not mentioning X about Bezos, who owns the Washington Post. So she acknowledged it, but she's an editorialist. She's not a news reporter. So I asked Chuck Todd and Marty Barron last week about news reporters, and should we worry about them self-censoring? Here you're going to hear. First you'll hear Chuck, and then you'll hear Marty Barron.
This is my critique of the legacy media organizations who have also been surrendering and who have been telling their correspondents not to ask tough questions because they don't want to create viral moments with Trump.
Is that true?
I think you would see it in the coverage. The coverage day to day has been aggressive. It has held Trump to account. Every day they have another revelatory story. And also, look, I have a lot of sources within that newsroom. I would know if there were interference.
Now, I know all four of us want Marty Barron to be right, but starting with you, Adam, how do we know that Chuck Todd is not? And by the way, Chuck said in that interview, he's spoken to a ton of reporters, not just his own thesis, who've said they've been told by the bosses to tone it down a little bit.
It's awfully tough to prove something via the omission of material, right? I think there are times, flashing back to COVID, I remember hearing a description, I won't say who in the media offered this description, but a description of Trump. A reporter said that he had sometimes questioned the necessity of wearing masks. And I remember when I heard this characterization, nearly driving off the road because it was such a blatant misrepresentation of reality. It wasn't that then President Trump, now President Trump, had sometimes questioned the need to wear masks. It was that he had mocked people who did, said they were being politically correct, said it was stupid, unnecessary. So sometimes
that's a perfect example.
Sometimes you hear something like that and you can say to yourself, all right, that person is clearly trying to curry favor or to not offend one side, to do both sides.
Or not upset his boss or her boss.
Or not upset his or her boss. But in terms of questions going unasked, that's trickier.
So you said self-censoring. That would mean the individual doing it, but the way you posed the question was, did the bosses say? That's a different kind of censoring.
Well, I guess, you're right. Ruth Marcus self-censored, as she described,
Right.
but I'm talking about both things. Either an order from the boss, or you worried that the boss doesn't want you to cross the line, even if it's unspoken. So in that case, you self-censor. You're right. They're two different things.
So I just want to just separate the two, because there may be some instances that we know not of where bosses are saying, either by implication or, a wink and a nod, let's just be careful. But I think what may be happening that we don't know about, to Adam's point, is the unanswered questions, or the reporter saying, okay, this is like the 5th day of this story, and I could add something to it because I have this information. I'm just not doing it. I've just decided I don't need that. I don't need that grief right now, and I'm just going to step back. At some point, said reporter says, I'll come back, but I don't feel like I need to add to that right now. 5 other people have said something. I know I have new information. I'm just not doing it. That may be happening. I don't know. Because as we look around, a lot of people have resigned or lost their jobs, or in the case of this NPR reporter, who has now had to go undercover.
Explain
tell
what
people about that.
her sin that causes her to go into hiding.
So there was a press conference on the tarmac, I guess, with impromptu with President Trump and several other officials, and she's juggling her boom mic. People have seen those long mics, and probably trying to take a note or whatever. And in the juggling of it, accidentally hit him, and said,
in the face,
and you can hear her saying, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." Clearly, he then makes a joke about it.
Yeah, he did.
President Trump makes a joke about it. So, you're going to be on TV tonight. That's a big moment. Blah blah blah. But people in his name, and we've seen this before, decided, oh, she did it deliberately, and so we should make sure that she pays for this. And so they're haranguing her and haunting her and name calling, to the point that she's had to remove herself from social media and just almost essentially go into hiding. And this is after the president himself said, big joke, haha, you'll be on the TV tonight.
This is Danielle Kurtzleben.
Yes.
Yeah, that was just...
So when you ask me the question about self-centering, I think about, now if I'm Danielle Kurtzleben, the next time something comes up, I can make a choice about, in this moment, do I have to...
200 feet away to ask the press conference, ask no
because I'm going to
questions.
get blamed anyway.
Yeah.
And, I don't know.
Can I read you some breaking news here and get your reaction? Jamie just sent this to us. It's on Drudge. It's concerning the New York Times story that Musk was getting briefed about potential war plans, which obviously Trump denied, and who knows. This morning, Trump wrote this is the story that's on, I don't know what the source is. Who wrote this thing, Jamie? We'll find out in a minute. Politico, thank you. Trump wrote in a post on his True Social platform, quote, how disgraceful it is that the discredited media, that's the New York Times in this case, can make up such lies. Anyway, the story is completely untrue. Musk, who called the New York Times, quote, pure propaganda, and issued a threat saying he looks, quote, forward to the prosecution of those at the Pentagon who are leaking maliciously false information to the New York Times. They will be found, he says, in quotes. What's your reaction to that, Callie Crossley?
Well, we just got done talking about Danielle Kurtzleben accidentally tapping the president and getting that. So you can imagine what might be other thoughts for people who think they're standing in for the president. I think what we can do in this moment, and what we must do as journalists over and over again, is to continue, I was listening to the judge, to talk about where the law is, what our job actually is, versus what someone may say it is, and just keep saying it over and over again. So that the fact that what he is saying about attacking reporters and this is propaganda, we can only defend by saying what our job really is.
Yeah, and this is a steady drumbeat coming out of the White House, right? Is that negative coverage of the administration should be illegal. We've heard this again and again and again. So it's sort of ramped up from where President Trump was in his first term in office. He's taken it to new heights. Seems like he's being egged on by Elon Musk. Worth reminding people that, in fact, reporting that makes an administration look bad or an individual look bad is not de facto illegal.
No,
right?
no.
By the way, I
It
don't have
doesn't
the
seem
story.
like you need to emphasize that, but you do.
I think we need to say that, because
Marjorie.
people are getting told things and they're like, well, where's the line? He's the president. So that's the answer. He should be able to do whatever. No, actually, there are lines and rules.
The story that the New York Times story this morning, or the story about it, said that another outlet had verified this information as well. So the New York Times is not alone about this, but he loves to call the New York Times the failing New York Times, I should say. I'm biased because my daughter works at the New York Times. She's not a journalist, but she does work there. She always calls it the failing New York Times. And when these two reporters, it used to be with the Washington Post, wrote a piece in the Atlantic about Voice of America, then he goes on a tirade about the Atlantic. He calls it a third-rate magazine. The Atlantic is doing terribly,
very
losing
badly.
a fortune. Hopefully will fold up and be gone in not too distant future, when in fact the the Atlantic is doing very well, owned by the widow of Steve Jobs, and is hiring people, including those two great reporters from the Washington Post. So he does this constantly, but it's in that authoritarian playbook. I mean, it's really bizarre when you think about it, because this is what happens in other countries. We had that piece written by the guy that was in Hungary, the reporter in Hungary.
Orban, yeah.
With Orban, and talking about the way he, as Orban put it, owned his own media.
Right.
So that's what's happening here.
Yeah, and what he describes in that piece, the Hungarian journalist, when he talks about captains of industry or media moguls in Hungary cozying up to the regime because they feel like it's in their own best interest, it's no different than Jeff Bezos giving $1 million for the inaugural, right? Or Amazon spending $40 million. $40 million
yes.
for the Melania doc, like nearly 3 times more than any other.
Not spending $40 million, giving her $40 million.
That's
Point. Yes.
Can I read
Ponying
something?
up $40 million.
Two people make a fairly good point. Gail from Brookline, anonymous texter. This is a riot, meaning criticizing us. Did the media censor itself during Biden? They say in his dementia. They mean as he was obviously slowing down, let's say, to say the least. How about when the liberal media self-censored about Biden, again, their words, being senile? I think there's some legitimacy there.
I do too.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of people, Jeff, who's the guy at CNN that's writing a whole book about this? The guy that's on
Jake Tapper.
Jake Tapper's writing a whole book about this. I think they're both right. I think that there were people that knew, and certainly the people around him knew, and I assume there were some reporters that knew and didn't report on it. Remember Annie Linsky, who reported on this? She used to be a Globe reporter. She reported this.
Oh, the Wall Street Journal.
The Wall Street Journal, and she got totally trashed. So they have a point. But the point is that. I mean, we all make mistakes. I've made a million mistakes, and very bad mistakes. But you try to correct the mistakes. That you're not intentionally lying, and that's the difference, I think.
Well, I think the point is that then the Biden administration did not try to shut down the organizations that are doing the investigative work. I mean, for what they did or didn't do. I mean, he recognizes that a free press is very important as foundation of democracy.
Can we spend the last few minutes on, there was so much focus on the mayors last week, and it was a pretty impressive day. I would say for even Adams was okay from New York. The 4 mayors were pretty impressive, and I thought the committee was totally unprepared and unimpressive. Well, speaking of unimpressive, Marjorie Taylor Greene is the chair of a subcommittee, the Doge subcommittee in the House of Representatives. This Wednesday, Catherine Marr, who is the CEO of NPR, and Paula Kerger, who is the CEO of PBS, will be appearing before her committee. And the title of the hearing is Anti-American Airwaves, Holding the Heads of NPR and PBS Accountable. Adam, first, what's your expectation of this thing here?
It's so hard to do well if you're in an inherently adversarial setting like that. I can't remember what the title was for the mayoral hearing, but it was similar. It was basically, bad mayors on parade. We hold them accountable for sanctuary city madness. And yet some of them managed to do really well with, I would say, Michelle Wu topping the list.
You were there in the room. I forgot.
I was there in the room.
We spoke to you, yeah.
But it's awfully tough, I think, to avoid just getting, I was about to use an inappropriate terminology on air. It's awfully tough to avoid just getting beaten up because, we saw in the hearing with the mayors, you can start to answer a question.
Yep. Yes or no?
Yes or no. Reclaiming my time. The answer is no, isn't it? It drives me insane what the questioners are allowed to do. So it's going to be awfully tough for the CEOs of PBS and NPR, I think, to turn in a performance like Mayor Wu did, just given structurally how the deck is stacking.
What's your sense of this?
I would echo that and say something else, which goes back to what I just said. We're not doing the best job that we can do about saying where the lines are, what free press means, why that's important. So when they go to sit before this committee, not only is it already set against them, but there are not a lot of people with the correct information about how journalism works. Okay, so now they're going to have to try to defend everything about public media and us and how it's supposed to work in a crowd of people that believe some of the propaganda or know nothing.
The ideal is they need to come equipped with examples of tough coverage of Democrats as well as Republicans. That's essential.
Of which there is plenty.
Let me just say, by the way, Jamie just alerts me, which is great. NPR media correspondent David Falkenflick is booked for this segment next Friday, the week of the hearings, and he'll be at the hearings on Wednesday. They've
already described him as a radical.
Of course, that's why we're having him, because we only have radicals on the show.
That was, and Will Lewis at the Washington Post, the editor of the Washington Post, called him an activist, I believe.
Yes, an activist.
And Will Lewis is the guy that some very high-ranking former Washington Post stars are saying should be fired by Jeff Bezos so the paper can return to its
which is weird, because why do you think the problem is Lewis, not Bezos? To me, that seems like wishful thinking. But
well, they're not going to get one guy can be fired. They're not going to get Bezos to fire himself, even though what was it?
Kyle, we never got a chance to ask you about Bezos' girlfriend's outfit at the inauguration. What do you think of that?
Here we go.
Woo-wee. I think she needed a book called Appropriate Dress. That's what I would say.
I couldn't get over that. We were talking about that for days.
I'm saying, and I just want to be clear, whatever she wore later at the ball's appropriate. Yeah. But in that moment, totally inappropriate.
Yeah, it was middle of the day.
Can I just respond to Adam for 1 second? Ordinarily, I would 100% agree with your analysis. The deck is so stacked. But I think the reason 3.5 of the mayors did so well. Wu was rhetorically terrific too. Yeah. In addition, they came with facts. And they were relentless in their fact telling. And I'm not saying it's easy. Believe me, I don't want to be there either. Most of the Republicans had no idea what they were talking about. They got talking points from somebody. They're raising their voices. The four of them stayed totally calm but relentless. And I don't know either. I don't know the head of PBS. I don't know the head of NPR. I know about them. But I'm exactly what you guys said. Go armed with admit when you've made mistakes, which I think is a really important thing to do if it's clearly a mistake. And when you've done good journalism, which PBS and NPR do in huge volumes, market the hell out of it and don't let yourself be bullied by know-nothings. One of the least, I would argue, informed people in America, not just in Congress, is Marjorie Taylor Greene. Well, that's a pretty good person to go up against, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, she's not a bad person to have as your foil.
Exactly.
Again, I also would point out over and over again, if they have these facts at hand, that prior to this Congress, and I don't know what the numbers are now, there were always, even if they were the most conservative folks, who stood up for public media, particularly in rural communities.
Because that was all that
this is the lifeline. And they made that point. They made the point.
You're right.
There was support there. So they should be quoted. These examples should be brought to the fore. But I will also say it's also tough in a spontaneous situation to recall from the file exactly what you need in the moment.
So, by the way, not only will we have Falkenflick on here on Friday, we'll be covering the hearing. We're not going to do it wall to wall, but we will provide a lot of what is said by both committee members and the head of PBS and NPR. That's next Wednesday.
They should put a few wombats in the audience. What do you think? Lighten things up.
It is great to see you both. Adam, Callie, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much. We've been speaking with GBH's Adam Riley and Callie Crossley for our Friday media analysis segment, Press Play. Thank you both for coming in. Coming up after a quick break, we're going to open the phone lines and text lines. Would a random act of kindness from a stranger really mean more to you than a pay raise? Some of the overpaid researchers over at the World Happiness Report seem to think so. We're going to talk to you about what matters more to you, those acts of kindness or having money. Weigh in next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Judy Ewell in for Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, local colleges are advising international students to be cautious about spring break travel. College deans say visa rules and travel restrictions can change suddenly. The Boston School Committee has voted to close 4 schools and merge 2 others. Plus, on today's Joy Beat, the Human Movement Project, celebrating dance, performance, and physical wellness in Boston's Hyde Park neighborhood. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH's All Things Considered.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Emerson Colonial Theater, with a Broadway production of Jason Robert Brown and Alfred Urry's musical Parade, coming to Boston for 2 weeks, this March 11th through March 23rd. Tickets at emersoncolonialtheater.com. And the Skating Club of Boston, presenting the ISU World Figure Skating Championships with over 300 athletes competing at TD Garden March 25th through 30th for the title of World Champion. Tickets at isuworlds2025.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marge Regan and Jim Browdy. We are rounding the bend, or whatever that expression is, live at the Boston Public Library. Thanks, y'all, and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. You know, yesterday we were talking about the U.S. dropping to a dismal 24th, lowest ever in the World Happiness Report's list of global well-being or happiness, whatever. Today we're taking a stab at the study from another angle. According to the researchers behind the report, the average person in the world gets more satisfaction out of performing random acts of generosity and kindness than getting a salary bump from their boss. Kindness is more rewarding than a salary increase. Our number is 877-301-8970. Is this believable? In your life, is providing a level of generosity to strangers more valuable to you than getting, I don't know, cold, hard cash in your hand? We usually don't like sappy stories on the show, but if you've had a specific interaction you want to share with us, which was really enriching for you, fine. Or if you think this is all BS, give me the check. Forget the kindness thing, particularly now in this country. Give us a buzz. 877-301-8970 is the number. Now, you would clearly take kindness over money. Is that not correct?
Well, now it
depends how much.
Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, it's awful to be broke. I mean, it's very stressful to be broke. And you know, I said this to you before the show. This is a terrible admission. It makes me seem like a terrible person. But you try to be kind. I think kindness is very important. But why do I find those bumper stickers that say commit? What do they say?
Random acts of kindness.
Random acts of kindness.
You want to ram the cars that have them on them?
I feel a hostility toward people with those bumper stickers. That's kind of paradoxical. I don't know why I feel that way, because I assume that they're committing random acts of kindness all the time. And remember we talked about when we used to have tolls on the Mass Turnpike, this is like about 10 years ago, how some people would actually pay ahead. They would pay for the person that was behind them in the tolls. And I said, wow, that is really impressive. Have you ever done that? I have never done that.
Have I done that? Many a time.
I don't believe you. I don't believe you. But that's what this study says, that you will feel much better. You'll be happier with the kindness acts. And they talk about how it's much better to actually do something for someone, as opposed to like just giving a donation, than an hour of volunteer work or other small act of kindness.
Well, whatever, but it's like, whatever works for you.
This is kind of pathetic, but when you're driving, I'm kind of an aggressive driver. You're not. You drive like an old lady.
Thank you.
But it is really sometimes hard, which makes me feel like it seem like a terrible person too, to let somebody cut in front of me in traffic. Really? I mean, that's a small thing, but you see some people that do it all the time. They will always let the car in at the intersection.
That's a beautiful story in light of the fact that has absolutely nothing to do with what we're talking about. It is lovely.
Wait a minute.
Those are acts of unkindness.
No, but I'm saying an act of kindness is to let someone come in front of you. Well, I've done it sometimes.
Well, it's because you just got a raise
but you know
that day, or what?
When I do it, I think, boy, I'm really a great person. Okay. I let that person cut in front of me in traffic.
Here is how this our audience is. I mean, they are who they are. Here's an anonymous texter. As a CEO, I'm thrilled to hear this news and will be compensating my employees accordingly. John from Peabody, the random act of kindness I would appreciate is someone giving me more money. Okay, 877-301-8970. I asked the following people if I could use their names, and they said, yeah. We went to dinner last night with Myers and Chang from Flower Bakery and Myers and Chang, Christopher Myers and Joanne Chang. Right before we got there, they had been in the parking lot. A woman about 30 gets out of her car and is crying like wildly, really bawling. And you know what Christopher Myers says to the woman?
Why are you crying?
Could you use a hug?
Oh, could you use a hug?
And the woman said yes, and she gave him a hug. He gave her a hug. After that, Joanne Chang says, after her husband has done it, can I give you a hug too? And they do. And I have to say,
oh my God.
And we talked about this, I would say instead of dinner being 90% about Trump, which I assume was what it was going to be, it was 90% about this thing that not only made them feel great, not to mention the woman, but also made us feel great, and we had nothing to do with it. So I think there is great value, especially at a time when so many people in positions of power don't give a damn about anybody else. Now, maybe more than ever, doing something kind and generous for somebody else is probably more rewarding.
So what's your first move?
What?
What's your
I was
first
going to hug
move?
Jamie after the show.
Okay.
Is that okay, or
Okay.
you prefer not?
I went to one of these random acts of kindness websites. They give you a whole list of things that you could do. You send a little card to a loved one you've not spoken to for ages. You bake something for your neighbor. You pick up litter from your local neighborhood. Michael Dukakis used to do that every day, walking from his house in Brookline to Northeastern. He'd have a plastic bag, and he'd pick up trash all the way. Probably now he doesn't have a plastic bag. He has something, a recyclable bag. Let someone go in front of you in the line, and tell someone what you love about them, and offer to walk someone's dog.
That's very nice. Now, by the way, Peter in the audience, where are you, Peter? Peter, there he is over there. Peter texted in something that you can relate to, Marjorie. The people with those bumper stickers, meaning random acts of kindness, are always the first ones to cut you off in traffic.
That's right.
That's pretty good, Peter.
I mean, they're running a free ad on the back of their car about how kind they are, how upstanding they are, and you always wonder, are they really, or is this just a scam?
Can I get sappy for a second?
Oh,
I mean,
by
we
all
all like,
means.
I mean, everybody likes making a decent amount of money.
Mhm.
It really is, you do feel good when you do something good. Don't you really?
Yes.
You don't like talking about it because you do a lot of good things.
I
and
don't.
Marjorie,
I cut
Marjorie
people off in
hates
traffic.
No, whatever.
Yeah, but I think you
you're
do. I
impossible.
think it's true. You do feel. But the money thing. Remember a few years ago that you had to be making more than $75,000, otherwise you had huge pressure on everything. I don't know what it is now because Boston is so expensive. But to be constantly worried about whether you're going to have enough money to pay the groceries, and pay the rent, or pay the bill, that's very stressful and makes you very unhappy, I think.
Jamie just wrote me a note. The guy who runs our show. He says, "Hold the hug. I prefer the cash." So apparently, not everybody feels the way.
Lynn from Buzzards Bay. What do you think, Lynn?
Hello, Lynn.
Oh my God, you guys, you make me laugh every day.
Oh, well, good.
You make me happy, and the rest of us. I love you. I watch you all the time. I'm serious.
Thank
Every
you.
day
Thank
you
you.
can watch you or listen to. But I found that just going down to the Cape Cod Canal where I live,
Mm-hmm.
and literally just smiling at the people that come up to me with their pets or by themselves, that is such a gives me such great joy. It really does. And I have to also say, this is a shout out for the Catholic Church, Marjorie.
Yeah.
As a Catholic, I go to Mass now every day.
Really?
Especially during these times. Every day. I go to Mass, then I take my dog for the walk on the canal. And that has been my joy for the past, craziness, 40 days of craziness.
Yeah. Yeah.
But my priest tells us all the time, this is your therapy. Save your money, come to Mass, and I'm not like a super, cuckoo Catholic. I'm just saying, if you call yourself a Christian, do Christian things by literally just smiling and hugging one another.
Lynn, you're a good
that
one.
was a great.
You're a good
That's
one.
a great
Thank
call.
you.
That's a lot. A lot of people like the masses that are during the week instead of on Sundays because they're much quieter and more peaceful.
What do you mean? Fewer people or something?
Well, they're smaller. They're smaller and they're quicker and there's no music. It's just very peaceful as opposed to like the weekend masses, which are more busy and full of singing and stuff like that.
As you know, I don't go to Mass, but I don't want to
that.
be self-complimentary, but I do exactly what Lynn does. I'm always smiling at people. I'm always in an upbeat mood, trying to bring other people joy. That's my MO. Get out of bed in the morning, and that's how I approach my day.
This woman I know who is really nice. She talked to me about what she does is she travels a lot, and she talks about how charming she tries to be to the TSA agents. And, they don't get a lot of that. And she said they're always so stunned that somebody is...
But is that because she wants to be nice or because she wants to be treated?
No,
it's like a transactional thing?
I think it's because she feels as though they take so much abuse and grief at the airports that she wants to be somebody that makes their day more pleasant.
Before I get back to the calls, I know you are, I know you hate this, but I'm saying it so don't respond.
Yep.
You are a really kind person. Are you conscious, though? I mean, that's who you are. But beyond
I'm not that kind, Jim.
Okay, I knew you. Stop.
Okay.
Beyond how you are you conscious that you want to do a kind and nice thing?
Yes.
You are?
Yes.
Why?
Well, because I don't know.
Because it's the right thing or because it feels good to you too?
I think it feels good to me, and I think it feels good to the person you do it to. Now, a texter just said, I drive a bus in Boston. Next time I see Marjorie in the bus lane, I'll let her cut in. That's a good one.
Look at this. This is also for you. This is beautiful from Joel in Connecticut. Jim, often I give my tickets to the library for your show to others. It feels great. That is a lovely act, Joel.
It's
Thank
so
you.
funny. A lot of people say that. Rebecca from Florida says, but with a salary bump comes the ultimate happiness, being able to afford tickets to see Boston Public Radio at the Boston Public Library.
Something.
We should just correct the record. You need tickets here. This is free. Nope, you can come and you can stay for as little or as long as you like. It's a free deal. Let's go to Rob from Dover. Hi, Rob.
Hello, Rob.
You know something?
What? 1 second, Rob.
No, I was just going to say, you were very kind about certain things, as long as you're
like
being
what?
sappy toward me. Well, when someone does something nice, you usually send them an email or a card or something like that. So it's very impressive,
thank
Jim.
you for saying that.
Aren't we upstanding citizens here?
Well, who said that? Was that Zoe who said that?
Yeah.
Zoe said you do?
Yeah.
She won't be getting a note.
You were sending a note to somebody that I should have thought we should
Well,
have sent
that's
a note
not one of your good. I am good at those
you're
kind
good
of.
at that.
You're not very
good at that. I'm not. I'm terrible.
Well, because you don't even remember who the people are, much less
I don't
thanking
remember
them.
who they are and what they
Exactly.
did. Rob
who
from
are
Dover.
you and why are you here?
Thank you for calling, Rob.
Hello, Rob in Dover.
Hi.
Hi.
Nice to talk to you guys again.
You too.
I think that being kind to others is always better than kind of getting a pay raise, as long as you have your needs met. Like if you have your natural hierarchy of needs met, then and maybe a little bit more to do something nice for yourself, then I think giving back is really, it gives you more than you give. Our synagogue has been resettling refugees for the last, since Kabul fell, and obviously we've had to stop now, but that's a different story. But we've helped furnish apartments for over 30 families.
That's fabulous.
And wow.
It's amazing. It just gives us so much pleasure, and the community that we make together with being kind to these kind of strangers is amazing. And you see other people being kind, and it fills you with hope and goodness. And right now there's a lot of darkness, and so the more you give kind of light out into the world, I think the more you kind of get back.
That is a fabulous call and fabulous thing you and your neighbors did at the
listen to
synagogue.
this.
Thank you, Rob.
This is Joanna from East Greenwich. I made a decision every time the horrible man in Washington does something terrible, I do something nice for someone else, a small act of resistance and a tiny way to rebalance the negative. And then we have Jeff in Andover. One day I saw a homeless man with a sign saying hungry. I handed him a package of English muffins I happened to have in the truck, to which he responded, I don't have a toaster.
I thought you were going to tell my story, which I haven't told in years, so I'm allowed to tell it.
What?
I am in Central Square before they shut down the Dunkin' Donuts.
Oh, yeah.
And I ordinarily don't. I'm conflicted about giving money to people who are asking for money, because some people in the industry say it's not a good thing. You should give them a thing, maybe a sandwich, cup of coffee. You don't know what they're going to do with it. But I actually had, this is when you actually carried cash and I had change. This is one of the most humiliating moments of my life. I walk outside, I have a couple of quarters in my pocket when I still have, I don't think I would change in my pocket in years. And this guy was holding a cup of coffee, a Dunkin' Donuts cup outside. I dropped the 2 quarters in, and by the way, I'm feeling better about myself than I am about him. And you know what the guy said to me? That's my coffee. Sadly, a true and horrible story.
Okay, Susan in Manchester.
I bought him a cup of coffee.
You did? That was very nice.
What am I going to do?
Susan in Manchester says her sister-in-law pays for the coffee for the person behind her in line every single morning. And then this other person...
By the way, can you say that? How great is that?
That's great.
I mean, it's a little tiny thing.
That's
it costs
great.
a few bucks.
And then you
feel
can
great.
kinda
And somebody's
do it-
going to do it for you, too.
But you can do it anonymously.
Yeah.
You can pay for the coffee, walk out with your coffee, and then when the person goes to pay for their coffee, the person behind the counter will say somebody already
paying
paid.
it forward. Now, let me
Yeah.
ask you something.
Listen to this.
What's that?
I paid $36 for grocery for a person in front of me whose SNAP card didn't work. It felt good for at least an hour or two, and I totally forgot about it until this show mentioned random acts of
Well, you know, we
kindness.
got off this. The original subject was what feels better to you, getting a raise or doing something kind for somebody else. And these people who did the World Happiness thing said the majority of people think a kindness thing. But you never answered the question, what is your figure? What is the number where you say to yourself, well, if we're talking that kind of money, 5 figures, and then you give up on the kindness thing? What do you do?
In Boston?
No. How much money do you need to get to say, today I won't be kind, I'll be happier for the raise? What is it?
I think in Boston, you're going to be making at least 6 figures.
No, I'm
to be able
talking
to
about the
relax.
raise, not your salary.
Oh, the raise?
The raise.
Oh, I don't know. It depends on what you're starting with.
Okay, fine.
I mean,
forget it.
what's your answer?
What?
What's your answer?
A lot.
A lot. For $500,000, Jim will.
No, it does not have. Okay, I'm sorry I asked. Lori in Boston, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show. Hi.
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 My question.
Yeah, you
was
sound
about-
surprised. You know you called us, right? It's okay, good.
Hey, long-time listener, second-time caller.
Love that, Lori. Thank you.
My question was, are people being asked, pick one or the other, or were they surveyed on their feelings after these actions? They
That's a
did
great
something
question.
Kind. How did you feel?
Yeah.
They opened their pay envelope and saw extra money. How did they feel? And if you are looking for something kind for you and the community Servings Lifesaver Gala is coming up.
When is that? Community Servings is a fabulous organization.
Yeah, tell people what they do. That's the medically corrected meals for people with different issues, is it not?
What's coming up?
Medically tailored meals. The gala is April 9th. You can go to servings.org and look at all the details, but it involves a cocktail party and dinner, and it raises money to feed our critically and chronically ill homebound neighbors, and you can volunteer there, and you will never have a better experience than doing a volunteer shift there.
Lori, that was great, and that is a fabulous organization. Thanks for both.
Did
Appreciate
you read
it.
this thing about what people expected if they lost their wallet?
No.
This was sort of
Oh,
interesting.
yes, yeah, go ahead.
The researchers in this study asked if people expected a lost wallet to be returned to them, and they asked if people expected a neighbor to return it, the police, or a stranger.
Mm-hmm.
And it says the United States ranks 17th in the world in believing a neighbor would return a wallet, 25th in the world believing the police would return it, but only 52nd place in believing a stranger would return it.
That's pretty sad.
So it means we don't have a lot of trust in
Other people.
Yeah, in other people. Although I had lost a wallet once, and I did have somebody come to my house with my wallet.
That wasn't when you tackled that guy and the cops never came?
No. That was when I got robbed at the
On Arlington Street, right?
In the Green Line. That was a long time ago. Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Okay, let's go to Jonathan in North Andover. Hi.
Hi.
Hey, good morning. How are you guys?
Great.
So I definitely think getting a raise is good, but I feel like acts of kindness means so much. Every morning, driving to work, I would come at an intersection, and there would be the same some homeless young person around my age, like 23, and occasionally I would bring him like a sandwich, something like that. But I think a huge thing I would do is, most people, they wouldn't roll down the window, they'd look the other way.
Mm-hmm.
But I would try to talk to him every morning when I'd go to the light, as just trying to ask him how his day's going, everything like that. Try to talk to him like a normal person. In the instance when most people, they look the other way, they don't want anything to do with him. And I think that just had like a huge impact. Like, hey, this guy wants to talk to me every morning at this red light. Like, I could see it made a huge impact on his day.
That's fabulous.
That's a great one.
It really is great.
That's a great one, Jonathan. Thank you
thanks.
for that.
Here's Zoe, speaking of wallets, our coworker. My brother's ex-girlfriend once lost her wallet in Boston. Some guy knocks on the door the next day to give it to her. It was Bill Evans, former police commissioner, think he found it on his morning run or something. Let me read one more. Tom, are you here in the audience?
Yes.
Who texted us? Where are you? Hi, Tom. Listen to this. I drive a school bus each morning, and for every student that gets on my bus, I smile and say good morning. It's enjoyable to see them go from groggy or stone-faced to a smile back. And I know someone I started their day with a good feeling. When they exit the bus, they all say thank you and have a great day back to me. It's a win-win. And it's only 7:45 in the morning with a full day
That's
ahead.
a great one.
That's pretty good, Tom.
That's a great
good
one. I love that one, Tom. Here's another one. What makes my day is hearing Jamie, our producer, laugh whenever you two make a spill. Have him laugh all of the time, requests
Well,
this texter.
Phil, you should, in the spirit of full disclosure, explain that.
Jamie laughs at stuff, say.
Every time he laughs, he gets $4. So last week he made like an extra $320 in his paychecks. I mean, really. I mean, I wouldn't overreact to that.
Listen to this. 40 years ago, my boss left a blueberry muffin on my desk for staying late the night before. I still remember that act of kindness and appreciation. Wow, that's from Paul and Cranston.
And it's also
Island.
tiny. I don't know if that's true or not, but I assume it's true. Small, it doesn't matter what the size of the generous act is. Do you agree with that or not?
That's right. That's right.
I don't think so.
Henry James, the great writer, said, only 3 things matter in life, says a texter. Be kind, be kind, be kind.
Oh, that's really nice.
Isn't that lovely? Okay.
Sort of, yeah.
Okay.
Patty in Swampscott, you're next on Boston Public. What?
Okay, no, go
Patty,
ahead.
wait 1 second.
I was
Marjorie's
just going to say, Carol from
can't
Rhode Island.
control herself.
She says she was in Boston trying to figure out how to manage the tea. 3 homeless men were sitting there, misinterpreted my confusion, pooled their money together, and paid for my ride.
No.
Isn't that a great one?
Oh, my God.
Yeah, there you go.
Patty
Okay.
in Swampscott, welcome. Hi, Patty.
Hi there, Jim and Marjorie. I want to tell you about an act of kindness I received.
Please.
2 weeks ago, I was at Market Basket,
Yep.
and this young person came up and bumped me and said, your shoelace is untied.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And the important thing to tell you is I'm 86 years old.
Oh,
I
Patty.
paused and I looked at my untied shoelace, and she said, I'll fix it for you.
Oh,
And so I let her do that. She squatted down and tied my shoelace. If I had tried to do that, I would never get up. And I was so touched by her kindness. To me, it was priceless.
That is pretty sweet and great story. Patty, thanks
That's a
for
great
sharing that
story.
with us. That is pretty good.
Who's the comedian, George, whatever it is?
George Burns said
George Burns.
he's on Johnny Carson one night,
And
he
he's
just
old
turned
by then.
no, he just had his 90th birthday.
90th birthday.
And Johnny Carson said, "So did you do anything special now that you're 90?" And George Burns says, "No." He says, "Well, one thing." He says, "Every time I bend down to tie my shoes, I see what else I can do while I'm down there."
I love that
Pretty
one.
good line.
I love
That's
that one.
Burns and Allen. For you young listeners, 2 of the funniest people who ever lived. Google them. Genius. Husband and wife, just genius comedians.
Okay, this is Jan from Cambridge. I live in Harvard Square. I regularly use the meter paying app, and I often use it to pay for people's meter who can't figure out how to use the app. I don't have quarters, but I do have the app.
Oh.
Wow, because you could be paying quite a bit in that app to park
That's a
your
very
car.
good point, Marjorie. So here's an anonymous texter. This is actually very moving for me and Marjorie.
Yep.
This is honestly a really nice segment, very surprising from you two. Thank you. That really makes us feel good. Thank you very much. You have time for one more call or a couple more texts. What do you want to do?
Rama from the car.
Hey
Hi,
there.
Rama.
Welcome. Hello.
Hello.
Hello to you.
All right, can I get do I have time for 2 quick things?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay. First of all, last 2 or 3 years, I've lost my ID twice. Both times they came back to me from people Googling my name and not finding me, but finding some relatives of mine, contacting them, calling them, getting a hold of me, going above and beyond to get my IDs back to me. Okay? And it reminds me of, I'm looking at my vision board, and I'll quote, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, you know it's coming, but people will never forget how you made them feel.
That's pretty great.
Oh, that's a good
Angelo.
one. That's a good one. Is
That
that Maya
is-
Angelou? That's a good one.
Boy, that is really a good one. Rama, thank you for your call as always. So actually, we have a very generous and kind.
We do.
Kind of audience.
Yeah, I'll have to let someone cut in front of me on the way home, Jim.
Do you really not let them do that?
I
don't you say
sometimes
to
do, but I
yourself, you have to
feel
cut in all the time, and don't you want people
I
to
know,
be nice to
I know.
you?
It's really, it's bad. I don't know why. It's like I get behind the wheel, and I feel like it's a dog-eat-dog situation there. You know what I mean? I've
So
been
do you-
driving too long in Boston, I guess.
Would you prefer a pay raise, Jared Bowen, or what would make you feel better? It's wrong. Doing something kind for another person, like me, for example, or getting a pay raise. Which would make you
Does
feel
it have
better?
to be you
Or no,
in
Eddie. It could
particular?
be anybody, yes.
Is that the right answer? That's the right answer. Doing something nice for someone?
Oh, well then, since you said that, that's a perfect segue. Let me explain to you how this show works, which obviously yours does not. Marjorie and I are older than our staff. I know it's shocking. But every single time one of the staff says, I really need a date, and I can't get a date, Marjorie and I, we get together, we go through our files, we go through our contacts. 99 times out of 100, we find that person a date. On your show, when somebody is interested in a date, they have to go to the Boston Globe to find somebody.
Yeah.
So I assume Max came up to you and said, can you help me find someone to go out with? And you said, no, I have more important things to do.
I said, I'm late for dinner plans. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
And he is part of, what's it called?
Dinner with Cupid.
Dinner with Cupid.
Dinner with Cupid.
And he got an A+ from the woman
I know.
in the damn thing.
I can't tell you how relieved I am when I first learned that this was happening. There he is. He's so. How great is this? This is
They're
fantastic.
actually two really couple.
I would say that.
I think they should get married immediately.
So I heard this in the. Are you ordaining it?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah,
They're adorable.
I'll pay for the open bar at the wedding. But when I heard about this in the control room, I blurted out, no, because I read this column every week, and
So do
people
I.
are so horrible
The
to people
comments
sometimes.
are brutal. Absolutely
so brutal. And then the dates toward each other, and I did not want to see Max go through this, and I cannot tell you how relieved I was this morning.
A+ he got.
When I saw that he got
That's
an A+.
right.
And he gave her an A-, which, you know, whatever.
Well,
which is just wonderful. It's lovely.
He's a lead singer in a metal band, and she said that gave him major attraction points.
I know.
It's a way to pick up girls.
It's beautiful.
You know.
We're very proud on the Culture
It
Show
should
today.
be. Should be. What are you doing on the show, on the Culture Show?
So we're going to talk about the theft at the Gardner Museum. Now, it's the 35th anniversary this week. We're going to talk about Broadway tickets that are approaching $1,000.
Oh, for Denzel
and Jake Gyllenhaal and Othello. And that's not the only show. These prices are just astronomical at this point. Staying with Broadway, we'll talk about there's this revival of Glengarry Glen Ross, and people are saying, well, when are we going to see the all-female starring revival? So we'll talk about that as well. And lots of other things, including Will Smith is back with a new album, first in 20 years.
Ooh. Jared Bowen, Culture
Jared
Show
Bowen.
with his colleagues in
Thank
2
you
minutes
very
and
much.
40 seconds. Don't go anywhere.
That is us for the us. Oh, that is all. Rather,
What is
for
that
this
again?
week.
I'm
It's
sorry.
all.
That
It's
is
all.
what?
It's all. It's all.
It's all.
Thank you very much for
Thank you.
listening. We are done. I want to tell you what's going on next week. I'll get on the right page.
Okay.
Okay.
Good.
You can keep up with us 24/7 wherever podcasts, or check out our TikTok page, Boston Public Radio. We have a really funny one on there now about Jim thinking it's Walter Cronkite. You can tune in Monday for 4 at Boston Globe.
Walter Cronkite. He's dead anyway, so why even bringing him up?
The best newsman of all time, Walter Cronkite, Jim Browdy.
Okay, good, fine.
Edward R. Morrow, Jim
Okay,
Browdy.
Marjorie's show's
Okay.
almost over.
Okay. On Monday, we're going to be joined by former Boston Globe editor Brian McGrory, Amherst College, Elon Stavins, Nicholas Revel from the Center for Addiction Science Policy and Research that Ozempic can help with other kind of addictions.
Yeah.
And Massport CEO Rich Davey, we haven't talked to him for a while.
He's back.
He's back. We want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aiden Conlon, Cole Garcia, Hannah Loss. Additional support from Tamsin Vidal, our engineer John LeClaw Parker, our executive producer Jane Bologna, who really laughs.
What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Turkish Airlines, flying to over 300 destinations worldwide, including Athens, Seoul, Mumbai, and more. A complete list of destinations and more information is available at turkishairlines.com. Thomas Cromwell, the royal fixer, returns to juggle glory, politics, and the whims of his brutal boss, Henry VII. Catch the head-rolling season premiere of Wolf Hall, The Mirror and the Light, Sunday night at 9 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jared Bowen. This is The Culture Show. Coming up today,
2 men dressed as police officers show up at the door.
And they say very dramatically, "Gentlemen, this is a robbery."
This week marks the 35th anniversary of Boston's greatest unsolved mystery and the world's largest art heist. With everyone wondering, will the paintings ever be recovered?
When I see those frames, I feel that they are waiting for the work to come back.
They're out there. Somebody stashed them. Sometimes it's the next generation. Grandpa's dead. Look what we got.
From there, it's the opposite of the steal of the century.
The 2024 Boston Celtics are one of the greatest teams in NBA history. We did it! It is Banner 18.
The Boston Celtics have been sold for the largest amount ever paid for a team in North America.
Care to guess what that company is worth now? Millions, billions, with a B.
$6.1 billion. If you love the arts, Boston Mayor Michelle Wu has extended her Family Days plan to include performances, historic sites, and more museums. Speaking of theater, hopes are high for plans to give the high-testosterone Broadway revival of Glengarry Glen Ross an extension with an all-female cast.
Put that coffee down. Coffee's for closers only.
Plus, all you Jane Austen fans, here comes an opportunity to roll up to the theater.
Rolling with the homies.
Rolling with the homies.
Yeah, let's do it.
Thought the 1990s film Clueless couldn't be a musical? As if. Are you ready for Emma to have another modern makeover?
Yes, everything from A to Z is awesome sauce and worry-free. A candy-colored symphony, and all of it revolves around me. Everything is perfect.
And after a slap heard round the world, followed by a very public clapback.
That was a greatest night in the history of television. Okay.
Will Smith is making a comeback with his first album in 20 years. We take on that and more right now on our Arts and Culture Week in Review.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
Welcome to the Culture Show live from the Boston Public Library. I'm Jared Bowen.
I'm Callie Crossley.
And I'm Edgar B. Herwick III.
We're going over the week's top arts and culture headlines, starting with the 35th anniversary of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum heist. I think it's so important to talk about this, not only because we want to share in the reward that comes from talking about it on the Culture Show, and by the way, there is a $10 million reward, but no, it's so important to talk about this so that people can become reacquainted with the theft, be reacquainted with the images of the 13 works that were stolen, because, as we learned this week, there is every hope that these works are going to come back. So just to remind people, it was late one St. Patrick's Day night, actually in the early morning hours of the 18th, when 2 people dressed as Boston police officers gained admission to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. They spent 81 minutes in the museum, ultimately made off with 13 pieces of work. 81 minutes in the museum they spent. It's kind of bizarre.
Yeah.
And the collection of things they took, also equally bizarre. Some absolute treasures among them, including Rembrandt's only known seascape and a Vermeer painting, which is so significant because there are only about 30 some odd Vermeer paintings in the world. And the FBI over the years has said that they know who took the paintings, they changed hands at various points, and then everybody associated with that immediate theft turned up dead in a variety of circumstances. And so here we are 35 years later, they still have not been returned. And I spoke with the Gardner Museum's head of security, Anthony Morey, this week on the Culture Show. And when I asked him about the common theory that the paintings have been destroyed, here's what he had to say.
I've spoken to everybody. I've spoken to every criminal that you've ever heard of, the most powerful criminals in the state over the course of 20 years.
Yeah.
No one has ever heard that the paintings were destroyed. No one. And in fact, that would be a great way to get us off their tail, right? oh, I heard those were destroyed. They're not destroyed. So we're very confident that we're chasing paintings that exist and will be in a condition to be hung on the walls again.
So Anthony Amore giving us hope.
Well, I believe that because on this show alone, we maybe have talked about 10 pieces that have been missing, that nobody ever expected to see again all over the world, and they've suddenly popped up in weird places.
Yeah.
In the attic, in the basement, somebody's brother, sister, cousin didn't know. I mean, so
Somebody saw it online.
Yeah,
and
somebody
like
saw it online. So it's gonna happen. I just can't. For me, I can't believe it's been 35 years and there's the trail is essentially cold right now.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I find myself thinking a lot about at the 35th anniversary of this, I mean, 35 years is a long time, and it's a long time, it's time enough where you start to really ask yourself how much of the legacy of the museum, of these pieces of work, are now the fact that they've been missing for 3.5 decades. I mean, obviously, I'm sure, I don't want to say you would prefer them not to come back, but you do sort of wonder with the fact that they have been gone for so long, the mystery of it for so long, the amount of media that has been put out there about this, whether it be, documentaries or fiction pieces or writing. You do start to ask yourself the question about whether or not the fact that they have been stolen and been gone for this long have been a bigger story than the works of art themselves. I don't know.
It is a very interesting question. Of course, people are much more familiar with the fact that Rembrandt had only one seascape. I think that people know more about the Vermeers by virtue of this. But I like to flash forward and think of the world where they return. First of all, that is going to be bonkers. The day that happens.
Yes.
Yeah. And I get that call in the middle of the night because I'm in the front row for that press conference. I am among the first to know. This will be an international sensation. And then the Gertner, which actually I think frequently sells out in admissions. I don't want to speak out of term, but I know the days that I've tried to get tickets, and sometimes it can be a little bit challenging, especially on a weekend because the museum is already so popular. That's a great thing. But imagine what is going to happen when those paintings return and people are beelining from around the world to be able to see this. I mean, there are people who go to see all the Vermeers wherever museums, so now they can come to Boston to see the one that no one has seen in multiple generations.
And it's still so interesting that the gentleman who was doing the documentary film that was premiering at the Somerville Theater, his little trailer for his people thought that was real. That was a little trailer from his film where he has all kinds of theories about what happened. And it was, oh my God, they've been found. No, that's just a trailer from my doc. But but it was pretty interesting, in the week of the 35th height.
But again, I think about that. I mean, Jared, you've covered the arts in this town for the entirety, essentially, of the time that these paintings have been gone. I mean,
I'm not that old, Edgar. It was 1990. Well, I saw the first news accounts over my crib.
No, but the point is, I mean, can you even imagine? I mean, how many times have you been to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum and walked into that room, and the poignancy of seeing the empty frames and the number of that at least to me, I mean, I've been to that museum so many times, and that is what that museum looks like to me. It is what it looks like to you. In some ways, it feels odd to me the thought that those paintings would be there.
Yeah, interesting. I just think it's a fabulous local story and an international one and a mystery and all these other things, because what I really want to know is why. I don't want them just to be returned. I would like to know why. And I don't know. Maybe we might not get that story because all those people have died, the ones who actually had hands on it at the beginning.
But you've got to imagine, the thing that will be really riveting if they are recovered is that, likely when they are recovered, you'll be able to piece together between what they already know and then what they will have learned from getting it to look back. And I would imagine that there have been at least a couple of times where they were so close to getting them, so close, or either crossed paths or drove past each other on 95 or something like that, going in different directions. I mean, it's crazy.
I know.
Well, you had to do a lot of decoding listening to the interview with Anthony Amore the other day, because of course he still has to keep some things close to the vest because this is an ongoing investigation. But what he did reveal is that he is having these conversations on, it seems like, a near daily basis. There have been so many places where they've gone, and this I've not heard before, where they've done x-rays, presuming that they're hidden between walls or underneath floors. So they have it down now what they need to do, and it's just a matter, in their estimation anyway, of finding where they are hidden at this point, and that's what it all comes down to.
Wow.
Well, on to what is far from a steal of this century. The Boston Celtics have been sold for a record $6.1 billion. This is incredible. This is a record sale if it all goes through, because of course the NBA has to approve this, the Board of Governors has to approve this, but it has a new owner, presumably, in William Chisholm, who has assembled this group to make this $6.1 billion deal. Just recently, within the last few hours, I believe, he spoke with NBC Sports Boston and was asked about his first meeting with President of Basketball Operations, Brad Stevens.
It's like I'm starstruck, first of all. Brad Stevens is a basketball genius. To be able to sit with him and just hear how he thinks about, the Celtics and talent and building culture and all that, that was an incredible opportunity, and I look forward to having more of those with him. So as a fan, you get a chance to spend time with them, and it's really, really special. And to be a part of it, and just even playing a little part in helping to maintain and grow the legacy is incredible. So I'm really looking forward to that.
This is going to be sizable change for the city, because it's been more than 20 years since we've seen any ownership change of the Boston Celtics. And I think that this is a really pivotal time, playoffs aside, just as Celtic City, the HBO docuseries that is being dropped I think it's Monday night right now. And we're reacquainted with how much the Celtics are integrated with this city. That's why the title is Celtic City, because they are of this town. They are of this town's history. This is a team that has always been mindful of their place in community, going back to the very early days. And as this documentary shows, the players now, Brown and Tatum, they are people who harken back to the early DNA of this organization. And now we begin to wonder what it means, if anything, in terms of a new ownership.
Well, when I first heard the news, I didn't realize that the guy buying it was a local guy. So he's
nobody realized. Apparently, the Globe reported that he didn't even have a Wikipedia page until this week. Like, nobody knew who this guy was.
Do you blame him? He's got $6.1 million to spend.
Listen,
so I don't blame him for being undercover. But so I was thinking to myself, does that mean that whoever bought it, some nameless, faceless, hedge fund guy, is going to take away whatever the local flavor vibe of the thing is? Well, he's from Massachusetts, and he apparently has an encyclopedia knowledge of all the stats of the Celtics and loves it. You can hear that in that clip with him talking about it. So he's very excited about this. By the way, his picture looks like he's a youngish guy. So to me, he matches the sort of kind of next generation that you just reflected when you talk about Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum and all the guys that have brought home this latest championship. I also note, good thing that he has the money to spend on it, because Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum and some of the other people have very, very, very expensive contracts. And
Indeed.
People are saying that the Celtics contracts overall will be the most expensive in history. So they've got, in order for him to make a profit and to keep this thing going, they got to figure that out. But I figure you don't have $6.1 million to spend.
Billion.
By the way, billion. And by the way, they say it's going to be about $7 billion by the time it's all put together. If you don't know how to do this, and you bring in with it the excitement of the locals. So, I don't really care about sports, as you know. I would give him one tip. There is a whole line of skincare products for Jason Brown. I'm telling you, Jaylen Brown, you better think about it, Mr. Chisholm. That's an opportunity.
Wow. All right. And maybe get Callie some of those products.
I'm just saying.
I'll tell you, interestingly, what strikes me most about that, I think I absolutely hear what you're saying about. I think that there's probably a number of fans here who are. I mean, obviously you're going to wait and see what happens, but I think that the fact that it is somebody who is a Celtics fan who has local roots who bought the team, I think that is something that I think a lot of people are going to breathe a deep sigh of relief, because there is always that worry. But I cannot get over the fact that, $6.1 billion. Now, the Celtics had last been purchased in 2002, so that's 23 years ago, for $360 million with an M. That is a 1,600+% return on investment. That
also,
number.
it just made me realize that's. Sorry, I'm not going to.
Go ahead.
You're
No,
about
go.
to point this out. That's the size of at least one of the contracts that we were just talking about.
That's right.
That the $6.1 billion number to me is absolutely staggering, and to a certain extent worries me about sports. I mean, on the one hand, I look at it and I say, interestingly, this is a television story. And it's a television story because the valuation of these sports franchises, whether it be in the NBA or these other sports, have ballooned and skyrocketed in the last 20 years, in part because of the television contracts that are out there, and the fact that, as we've talked about on this show so many times, nobody really knows how to find audiences on television or in streaming reliably, except for one thing that has continued to work is sports. And people still watch sports on television or on the streaming service, and advertisers will put money behind that. And so that has become such an important property that the valuation of these teams, I mean, it's crazy to me. But when I look at that and I look at those numbers and I think about that amount of money and I think about all of the sports betting going on, and I am talking somebody who loves sports,
right.
I sort of look at this kind of with this sort of one eye on it going like, is this all going to fall apart? Like, how do you hold sports as we know it together for long enough when these are the numbers that we're talking about?
And especially understanding that they're using this sale, the league is, as leverage to expand the league now and drive up prices for other franchise teams that may happen in astronomical sums. Well, let me just leave it with this. We spoke with the Celtics president, Rich Gotham, this week. This was before the sale was announced. Unfortunately, he's been with the team since 2003. That's fortunate. Unfortunate that we had talked with him before the sale was announced, but he talked to us about the importance of the Celtics legacy.
The Celtics are more than a basketball team, as the saying goes. It's a way of life. But it represents a lot more than just basketball, and it's such an integral part of the city and the culture in Boston and who we are. So, like, being involved in it is just sort of, you feel very humbled by that. We all do.
So hopefully that's a sentiment that will be carried on. By the way, you can hear more of that interview Tuesday on The Culture Show. Well, next, in basketball speak, Boston Mayor Michelle Wu has landed a slam dunk for Boston families. Free access to arts and culture for Boston public school students and their families expanded even more this week, as she announced in her State of the City address, as you'll hear here.
Last year, 50,000 students and family members visited one of Boston's museums for free. Thousands for the very first time through our Boston Family Days program. This year, we're adding Boston's revolutionary sites, the Paul Revere House, Old North Illuminated, Old State House, Old South Meeting House, and the USS Constitution, as well as our leading performing arts institutions, Arts Emerson, the Bach Center, Wheelock Family Theater, the Huntington Theater, Boston Lyric Opera, Boston Symphony Orchestra, and the Boston Ballet.
Well, you know how happy this makes me.
I know.
Somebody always talks about free admission. And, excuse me, I think that this is key to have the performing arts now be part of this, not to mention the other institutions, because I think that the performing arts, it's a little bit more complicated because you only have certain times of access. You only have a certain number of seats, unlike museums, where, of course, you can enter and have full unfettered access through the public spaces. But this took a lot of work, I think, on our arts and culture community to come together and say, let's figure out how to do this. Let's figure out how to set aside seats for certain performances, make sure that there is equity here. You don't want to invite people in and only give them the least expensive seats. So hopefully that is being figured out, as well as methods of transportation. If you're going to open your doors, hopefully you're also finding a way for people to get there. And this city is really coming together in relatively short order to make this happen with the administration.
I love the fact, and I just want to shout them out, the people that are supporting this, the Barr Foundation, Barbara and Amos Hostetter, Bob and Michelle Atchison, and Jim and Kathy Stone, and others, because, there are many requests made of all of these people, and they recognize the value of this. And I just want to go back to small me, little me, young me, and remembering those first moments going to the theater, to the ballet, and what that meant, those very first times, just blowing my mind and expanding my mind about, what people could do and what is possible. And to know, having been in that situation and knowing how eye-opening it's going to be for these kids, and you don't know who's in the audience. They're going to turn out to be the people writing the plays and performing in them and all of that. And
100%.
So it's wonderful.
100%. I was having a conversation with somebody earlier this week, and we were just kind of talking about, kind of economic systems, the way, just generally speaking, and the way things work. I mean, the economics, as we know, of performing arts organizations, of museums, are tricky at the best of times, and, right now are especially tricky. But at the end of the day, right, we as people decide to build our economic systems in some form or fashion, however we want to prioritize them, right? We're not in control completely of them, but you can make priorities and say, we're going to build a system that prioritizes X or Y or Z. To me, the big win in this is the fact that this is attempting to be done. I love this. It is in the model of, public-private partnerships, which have been great for the arts for decades and decades. It's, kind of how it's worked. That's in certain circumstances under threat as those systems as being a way to make these things work. But I love that in this city, like, people have gotten together and they said, you know what, this is something we want in our city. We want to have access, if we can, to cultural institutions, to performing arts stuff. We think that's important. And they found people with money who are going to throw some money at it. And they, as a government, as a local government, are saying, and we're going to work with them to try to figure out how to do this. It's working. They've expanded it. I love it. It's great.
And the timing is great because we keep talking about this on the show, and this is something I think nonstop about all hours of the night actually now, is what is the funding mechanism for the arts going to be going forward, coming out of the Trump administration and cutting off that funding from the NEA and the NEH. So how is this going to happen? There are only so many Hofstetters and bar foundations and other
Jim
corporations
and Kathy Stones.
who will step up, and they're being asked for a lot right now. But fortunately, this was early out of the gate, so they can see how this is working. And just to remind people who aren't necessarily familiar with this program, for the museums and now the historical sites that have also been added, like the Old South Meeting House, the USS Constitution, the Old North Church, this is twice a month. Boston school students and their families, with some restrictions, can go for free to these institutions and experience them. And it's because this model has just been piloted and hopefully will be long-lasting.
And I can't say how many studies there are about whether or not you end up making this your career. The exposure to the arts just enhances your life and well-being.
Yeah, I mean, it's well established. We know it to be true. Even if you go once, if you go once, you saw something new. You were offered a new perspective.
All right, well, you are listening to our Arts and Culture Week in Review live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. Coming up, put money in thy purse. That is, if you have any left over after buying nearly $1,000 tickets to Othello on Broadway. Are Denzel Washington and Jake Gyllenhaal worth it? That's next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
I'm Judy Ewell in for Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, local colleges are advising international students to be cautious about spring break travel. College deans say visa rules and travel restrictions can change suddenly. The Boston School Committee has voted to close 4 schools and merge 2 others. Plus, on today's Joy Beat, the Human Movement Project, celebrating dance, performance, and physical wellness in Boston's Hyde Park neighborhood. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH's All Things Considered.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And the Boston Speakers Series, announcing its 2025-2026 season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings, featuring Tipping Point author Malcolm Gladwell, Dr. Anthony Fauci, Ken Burns, and former National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster. BostonSpeakers.org. And the Associates of the Boston Public Library, hosting their annual Literary Lights Dinner on Sunday, April 27th, featuring esteemed authors including Elizabeth Strout, Ellen Hildebrand, and David Gran. Tickets at literarylights.org. And Subaru of New England. You can explore New England in the all-wheel drive 2025 Subaru Forester. Subaru retailer locations at subaruofnewengland.com.
Massachusetts was at the heart of the American Revolution and the gambling revolution.
The Massachusetts lottery was very innovative.
I'm Ian Koss. Listen to Scratch and Win wherever you get podcasts.
Welcome back to The Culture Show. I'm Jared Bowen, live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. I'm joined by co-hosts Callie Crossley and Edgar B. Horwick III. If you're just tuning in, it's our Arts and Culture Week in Review, which includes Othello on Broadway, making history as the highest-grossing play ever there. This is all thanks to the combined star power of Denzel Washington and Jake Gyllenhaal. However, this comes to the tune of $921 for your top ticket. This is to buy directly, not buying from a scalper or reseller or some sort of outside forces. This is buying directly through the theater. These are some of the highest prices we have ever seen for a Broadway show. And this seems to be starting to become the norm when you have Glenn Ross at $700-something, Good Night and Good Luck, starring George Clooney, at almost $800. This is major money. This is major inaccessible money.
It is. I will note that the Times points out that at some points you can get the lowest regular ticket price of $197, and there were some seats, depending on the day and time, where partial views were in the online lottery were $49. But to your point, the first two rows of the best seats at the most primary times are going for almost $1,000, and this is getting to be a habit across the board. So first, why is this happening? In general, that's a context of it's happening. We can talk about more about that in a second. But I think what's driving this particular show is Denzel Washington and people's association with him with Shakespeare. I mean, I do not have $921 to see him in a performance of any Shakespeare play because that's been his thing and how he's made part of his reputation, though a lot of people may not know that. So that's the first thing. Then it's just stunt casting. I mean, stunt casting is stunt casting, where we have these shows now where you can get these big stars for a few weeks, which is great. Nothing wrong with that. I just said I would do it if I had the money.
Yeah.
And there you have it. But it really makes it seem as though something that used to be felt accessible, I mean, you might have to juggle around a few things, is now just off the table for so many people who would enjoy this.
Yeah.
Edgar, before we get to you, to Callie's point, here's a little sampling of Denzel Washington's Shakespearean chops as demonstrated in the 2021 film adaptation of The Tragedy of Macbeth.
Tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out we've candle.
So there's the context.
Life is but a walk.
Yeah, I mean, also,
pay?
I'd probably pay a couple $100 to watch Denzel Washington read an instruction manual, now, and then you add to that Shakespeare, absolutely. I mean, I don't know what to make of this. I mean, this is a little bit, the money thing is a real theme in this show today. We were just kind of talking about it with the Celtics and the crazy numbers with the Celtics, the free stuff here in Boston. I mean, I understand why they cost this much, right? It's a limited product. There are only going to be so many great seats for so many performances of this thing, and as to your point, like Denzel Washington doing Othello with Jake Gyllenhaal as well. I mean, so I get that, and we know that for Broadway producers, just mounting a show has become increasingly crazy expensive. So this is where we're at. This is kind of what it costs to do business on Broadway right now. Now, we could look at that and accept that and say this is how it's going to be forever, or people can scrap away at it, and I'm sure they are in many ways, trying to find another system that maybe works a little better. So in the future, maybe it's not that out of reach for everybody to be able to partake in something like this.
I'm with you in that I think this is capitalism. This is exactly how it bears out. And we've seen some sense of this before. Remember, there were huge high-price tickets for Bruce Springsteen, for Book of Mormon, for Hamilton, of course. People point out that the last days of Hello, Dolly with Bette Midler on Broadway, people were paying about $1,000 to get those front row seats where she may grace you and grab your hand, because one of the acts in that show take place right near in front of the audience. But my only concern here is the structure. Callie, as you pointed out, with Broadway trying to come back after the pandemic, with prices rising, and because of inflation, it costs even more. So they're getting these celebrities to come in for 16 weeks. I don't know the contracts, but I think that I have a sense that the celebrities gain some sort of percentage.
Yes.
So in order for the producers to recoup their investments, they have to charge this much.
And I'll just point out that the New York Post critic is Johnny Oleskinsky, I think is how you pronounce it, asked the question, is it worth it? There's been so much interest in the cost of the ticket. He calls it slow fellow. He was underwhelmed by it. I note that he was uninvited after he noted the cost of the ticket, so he must have done it first. But he's asking, we should think about that. And I thought it was funny that he said to the production people, why are thou so thin-skinned?
But at the same time, sometimes it's worth it. I saw that performance of Hello, Dolly. I will remember that.
Were you in the front
Midler.
row?
I was not in the front row, but I will remember that Bette Midler performance. I just paid for my own tickets for Gypsy. I paid hundreds of dollars because I thought, when am I ever going to get to see Audra McDonald play that role? I know that is one of the roles I'll take to my dying day. So
that's the thing, and I think unless unless you find out that somehow I don't think there is any one person that is making sort of outsized money on this. It's to Jared's point. I mean, this is just capitalism. This is kind of how much it costs to do this right now.
All right, well, on to another play overflowing with male star power. The Broadway revival of David Mamet's Glengarry Glen Ross centers on Chicago hucksters who are backstabbing, morally compromised, and foul-mouthed. It is macho, testosterone-fed, and vigorously all-male. And it might stay that way as talks of an all-female replacement cast are now up in the air. There was a lot of talk about this. There was a lot of excitement about this. So this is a big, again, very high-ticket, very high-profile Bob Odenkirk, Kieran Culkin, Bill Burr taking over this cast.
And Michael McKean, who I also love. He's like fourth billing, but also Michael McKean.
Yes.
Totally fantastic.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of hope that when this turned over, because again, you're only contracting celebrities for about 16 weeks or so, that there would be an all-female cast. I thought that would be brilliant because it would be so interesting to see this language come out of the mouths of women. But now it seems that they've only extended the male cast's run through June, and there's no plans for an all-female cast right now.
Well, I'm not surprised about the kind of language coming out of the mouths of women. What I would be interested to see is how they take a very testosteronic play and put,
well, that's
some
what I meant.
other kinds of
I didn't mean the swears. I meant the dialogue.
The energy, the vibe of it is very male and very toxic male. And I'm not saying this, as any kind of offense to, in general, men. I'm saying this play and the way it represents these men. That's the whole vibe of it. And so how will they direct that so that women who could certainly act in this, will they have that, or will they go in a totally different direction?
Yeah,
I
mean, like that idea, right, of like kind of a man playing this part or a woman playing that part. Oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes can feel kind of like a gimmick or a little, kind of like a one-note thing. Okay, I get it, haha. But to both of your point, this is a play where I think that it would be quite illuminating. There is a lot of ground to mine with an all-female cast in something like this. So I mean, I'm with you, Jared. I was like, when I saw that this was maybe going to happen, I was like, oh my God, that would be incredible. I would totally see that. It's a little disappointing that at least right now it sounds like not, but there's been some buzz about it, so maybe it will eventually happen. One thing I am interested in, and so in the reporting on this, I saw in a couple places where they had noted that over the years, it had been made clear to David Mamet that this had been intended and that people have wanted to do this. But I haven't seen anywhere what his response to that is. I would love to know what David Mamet thinks, the playwright.
Actually, I did see that. He did? He and Jeffrey Richards, the producer, have both expressed interest in this.
So they've also expressed interest.
Yeah, which makes me wonder if they're floating this out there so that they can gain traction. And then when Meryl Streep takes the part...
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Then I'll have to fight you for my $521 ticket.
$921 tickets. Yep. None of us are going to be able to afford to see it when it happens, but,
If Meryl Streep is in this is going to be like a Denzel Washington, Meryl Streep showdown. I think she will take his arm off just like Gladiator 2. She will triumph for ticket prices on this one.
She will, because I will cut you all to get in line.
Yes. She terrifies me a little bit.
See, if we had after the show discussions, we could do our dream casting for an all-female Glengarry.
It would be so good. It would be so good.
But my money's already on Meryl.
Yeah.
Well, from Broadway to London's West End, where the 1995 film Clueless has been adapted as a musical, giving Jane Austen's Emma another modern-day makeover. Callie, I know this must make you very happy because you are an Alicia Silverstone fan. No, I'm just kidding. You're a big Jane Austen fan.
Big Jane Austen fan. And it's so fascinating to me that all of Jane Austen's works have been made over in so many interesting ways. And there seem to be no shortage of new ways of trying it. So why not a musical? I mean, it's been in every other iteration. I'll note that the last Emma iteration, which was beautifully done, starred Anya Taylor-Joy. That was fantastic. You hated it? Look
No,
at
I
you.
was happy. I was like kind of riding your joy.
Yeah.
And so I will be interested to see this, and I will be the first to say there have been some plays that have, I'm thinking of The Color Purple now when people said we're going to make it a musical, and I was like, are you kidding? No.
Yeah.
And then it turns out to be incredible. So I'll be very interested to see.
Yeah,
how
this
works.
is kind of like a who knows is going to be good, is it not? I mean, did you see the movie Clueless? Did you like it? And do you like that? Like,
Yes. I mean, it was very clever.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes,
and it's
yeah.
and I think it is. I mean, I love the movie too. I think it is a perfect candidate to get the musical treatment, and you can absolutely see this like kind of being one of these films that they are now taking and turning into a musical. But like, I could see this also being like just really bad as well.
Well,
I mean,
shall we judge? Because we
let's
have a little
judge.
bit of the trailer. Here's
Okay,
the
let's hear
trailer
it.
to the West End production
go.
of the musical Clueless. So it's Legally Blonde.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
It is
like
kind of Legally
the
Blonde.
music here done
Yeah.
by KT Tunstall, who had a couple of hits in the early 2000s. She's to me fine Scottish singer-songwriter. She's kind of fine. This is speaking of the marketplace. This is just right now. This is something that will sell, right? It's got the 90s nostalgia thing. That's big right now. So I get why it's happening.
And it's Jane Austen's 250th birthday. Come on.
It is?
Yes.
Wow.
And it's the 30th anniversary of Clueless.
Well, there you go. We knew where you were going.
While we're staying on theater, we have a quick other update for people who love Orville Peck. We happen to love Orville Peck here at the Culture
Jared,
Show.
are you among those who love Orville Peck?
So he's taking over the role of the MC in Cabaret shortly, and there has been a lot of wondering about what would happen with him because he is somebody who has always worn a mask as this country singer. Orville Peck, you can hear him duet with Willie Nelson and a whole myriad of stars in his latest album, but he's got this rumbling voice. He's kind of Johnny Cash by way of Elvis Presley. But he has decided to go full frontal when he takes over the role of MC in Cabaret. And by that, I mean he's dropping his trademark mask, which is going to be a big deal for people going to Broadway. We actually spoke with him on the Culture Show ahead of a concert he did here in Boston last November, and he discussed the significance of the mask for him as a performer not doing another show.
The mask I did because I wanted to make something artistic within country music, and I wanted to express it through this sort of emphasized version of myself, in the same way that I feel like Dolly Parton does, or Johnny Cash used to do, or, many old school country artists really used to do, where they sort of blew themselves up as big as they could, and that was their visualization of who they are as a country star. And so it was never on my radar to be like, I'm playing a character. I think it's going to be whatever it's going to be, and it continues to evolve, and I don't control it too much. I just kind of go with the flow.
And he pointed out he didn't want it himself to get in the way of this production of Cabaret.
I think that's very smart.
Yeah, I actually love everything about this. I mean, I think I find him as an artist to be very thoughtful about what he's doing, and like when he talks about the mask, there's a reason for it, and he's put some thought into it, and it seems pretty clear in this case. He said, like, I'm playing a character. This isn't the me show. So
Right.
since it's not me, I'm not going to do the mask thing. Although it's interesting, in an interview with the New York Times where he said that he's in the mask in the interview, but that's because the mask is him. And
Right.
I also love in a piece in this interview with the New York Times, he talked about the fact that he looked back on some of his diaries, and when he was like a teenager, had said playing this role would be a dream for him someday. So the fact that it's happening, I think, is great too. The fact that he's playing this role, it's something that he always kind of loved and wanted to do. And so I think it's cool. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think he's a really interesting and thoughtful guy.
He is.
Well, and again, this starts at the end of the month for people wanting to see him in New York.
How much are tickets?
That I don't know. Well, coming up, Will Smith makes a musical comeback with his first album in 20 years. That's next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
One day in the 1970s, a Cambodian refugee in California tasted his first American donut.
And he said it reminded him of a real Cambodian donut called Nom Kong, that it instantly brought him back to his childhood.
Not even a decade later, Ted Noy became a donut shop tycoon. That story and more next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Celebrity Series, composer Caroline Shaw and choreographer Vanessa Goodman present the dance and music installation Graveyards and Gardens, live at Harvard Square's Arrow Street Arts, March 28th through 29th, celebrityseries.org. And Babson College, where you can advance your career with an MBA or specialized master's at the school ranked number 2 best college in the United States by the Wall Street Journal. More at babson.edu/grad programs. And Revision Energy, a solar company and a Mitsubishi Electric heating and air conditioning contractor, offering customers the option to combine a solar array with a heat pump system to manage their heating and cooling at home. RevisionEnergy.com.
There's so much talk about what's going wrong in the world. But what if we took a moment and focused on what's going right? That's what we do each episode of the Joy Beat podcast. You can find it wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Welcome back to The Culture Show. I'm Jared Bowen, live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. I'm joined by co-hosts Callie Crossley and Edgar B. Herwick III. If you're just tuning in, it's our Arts and Culture Week in Review, which includes Will Smith's musical comeback. This is Beautiful Scars from Will Smith's new album, his first in 20 years, which comes out on March 28th. So this is the second wave of the comeback.
Yeah.
He had his films that have come out. The latest in the Bad Boys franchise last year did very well. His first film after, because we're all talking about this because of the notorious slap, they got him banned from the Academy Awards, got him sort of banned from culture for a while. But there's this slow and steady comeback, including this album, which is his first in 20 years.
And he was fully present at the Grammys. Had a big presence there, particularly in the tribute to Quincy Jones, who was kind of a mentor to him. So not only is this the first album in 20 years, it's really kind of his big return to music itself, because as you said, he's been doing all these other things and writing and producing. And he's going on tour, an extensive tour. The tour tickets go on sale today. The album drops next week. And I also think it's fascinating that the song that's been out there now just to represent the album is The Beautiful Scars, which I think says a lot about the stuff that he's been wrestling with.
Yeah, and and the album itself is called Based on a True Story, so, I guess between that and the lead single, it sort of promises to be somewhat autobiographical, kind of about him and his journey. I don't know, it's really hard with Will Smith right now, I think, to sort of see him in light of the slap. I mean, he can't just go away forever, right? He's not going to do that. And obviously, none of us want to be judged by our worst moments, and that's a pretty bad moment. And I don't know. It's obviously we're going to see what happens. We're going to see how ticket sales are for the tour. You know, we've seen what's happening with his films. They seem to be doing okay. I don't know. I find it so tricky right now still, and maybe repeated exposure to him, this will dissipate a bit. But every time I see him or hear him talk or think about him doing stuff, all I see and think about is the slap, which is, I think with some distance, seems even crazier than it did in the moment.
And the way I look at it is, I'm actually a little bit more nuanced about this, that in some circumstances you do get to come back. In some circumstances you do get to reflect and come back. And I think I feel that more so in this case because the slap happened in front of an audience filled with people who then stood up and applauded when he won the Oscar a few minutes later, which I just thought was preposterous. You have a man who gets up and slaps another man on stage, assaults another man on stage, and then you have a whole room of people in Hollywood who applaud it. That's the community.
Yeah.
And they all got a pass.
Well, that's true. The only other thing I would add is that there are a number of people trying to come back or have tried to come back, and you have to measure what he did versus some of the other stuff going on.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I'm not making an excuse for it. I'm just saying, that may be why people are a little bit more open to him. And remember, he can't show up at the Oscars. He's banned from the Oscars. So that may be the community that supported him, but he can't show up there. So when he sort of came around through the Grammys, that gave him another door.
Yeah. I think it's also, in his case in particular, I think it's also interesting because, even though, first album in 20 years, even though he's somebody who's been in hip-hop through that golden era of the 80s and 90s, he also had carved a little path in that where he was a little bit more of a nice guy. He was a little bit more of a fun times rather than getting involved in some of the more aggressive stuff that we had in the hip-hop world. As a star and an actor, he was a bit of an everyman and a likable dude and a nice fella. And so the slap thing, I think, kind of hits with him particularly hard, no pun intended, because of the image that he had cultivated. And I think one of the reasons I find myself struggling with it is that fear. And look, I mean, people who are cultivating public images it's not necessarily who they are. Yeah. But you wanted Will Smith to be that nice guy. And I think when you saw that moment, it really is, it sort of makes it difficult to understand whether he really is or not. Now, of course, we're all complex, and he still could be a very nice guy. He just had a bad moment. But it's tricky. Whoa. Oh.
All right, well, that's all, folks. The original Looney Tunes Merry Melodies episodes are no longer streaming on HBO Max. Meanwhile, Coyote vs. Acme fans are rejoicing as the shelved Warner Brothers film may soon find a new home. So here we have these two stories that are coming in tandem. And one is that Max, on the heels of pulling Sesame Street from their streaming, is now pulling all the Looney Tunes, the original Looney Tunes cartoons from the 1930s to the 1960s that so many people loved, so many people grew up on and were weaned on. Edgar, to clarify, I also did not watch it in the 1930s.
Saw them in the theaters.
Despite what
we went to the pictures and saw the Looney Tunes.
So they are pulling them, while at the same time, Max was a streaming company that did not air this Coyote versus Acme film. Basically, the sense was they were taking it as a tax write-off, but this may be sold so that people get to see it after all, because it was a $70 million film that was made, that was just sitting there for apparent no reason other than it was a business decision, not for quality at all, because it starred John Cena and Will Forte and a whole bunch of great people. But what is happening at Max? And they're removing things from the public culture, although maybe I go back to what I said about Broadway or Will Smith. This is just how things unfold. Sometimes we have things and sometimes we lose them.
Yeah, but in this instance, their comment, I don't know that I believe it, is that, well, children's programming is not drawing as much as it had, and so this is kind of a business decision, so why should we have it up here when it's not getting the same kind of response? And I say they have missed the whole point, because those cartoons, including Sesame Street, by the way, programming, adults watch.
Yeah.
They have really missed the point. The reason that young adult YA literature is off the chain now, and it is because what? Adults read it. So here is a huge marketing opportunity. And first of all, I don't know that everybody who loved it even knew it was on Max. So let's start there. who knows what they could have done with it if they put some energy into it. So it's just it's not even good capitalism. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous.
There's a piece of this puzzle there's two. One, I look at this and I wonder, is there eventually some other shoe to drop where somebody is gathering some assets and we are going to have some sort of streaming service that really loads into some of this kind of programming?
Could be like TCM or something.
Yeah, I mean, it could be, right? So who knows? So there's question number one. Question number two I have is about some of this stuff, like the Looney Tunes in particular, which is like, how much does it really cost just to keep it on there? I'm sure there's server space. There's probably some amount of licensing, but it's not like you're making, to say we're getting out of children's entertainment, to me says, all right, we'll stop making children's movies, but you're not you're just hosting this content. So obviously there's cost associated with it, but I don't have a sense of what that is. So there's that piece of it. What I find myself oddly feeling mostly about this is like, so you have this real cultural icon, which is the Looney Tunes catalog. I mean, I think about the animators like Tex Avery, Chuck Jones, Friz Freeling, Bob Clampett. You talk to animators, you talk to people in design spaces, these people are legendary. They are revered. These short films between 1944 and 58, 16 Academy Award nominations, 5 Oscars. This is a cultural treasure. This collection is a cultural treasure. And to see this property sort of being treated as a property and kind of getting caught up in this weird money thing, to me feels a little, I don't know, it doesn't tarnish its legacy, but it tarnishes us to a certain extent for treating that legacy that way. I don't know.
And the way they use the content that appealed to kids and adults, hello, your first opera, the Rabbit of Seville.
How many people heard classical music for the first time through Looney Tunes? That's a great question. I think many people.
Well, this is a hard one, just like the Broadway one. I really have been wrestling with this since I've been thinking about it yesterday and wondering, what does it mean when you have something that a whole generation comes to accept, but that was created by somebody?
Sure.
Because people have pointed out that pictures in museums go into storage, so you don't get to see them all the time. You have books that are taken out of print that you don't necessarily have access to all the time, although that's changing when you have Google Library and things of that nature. So things do come and go, but I think, and this is what we get for relying on one company to be the steward of a cultural property that we all hold near and dear.
I think that's absolutely
and I
right.
agree the same. I wish I understood more about what is so imperative about this business structure that they can't make it happen. And is it really a fact of licensing fees not measuring up to the number of streams that this is having, or is it something else entirely, another tax write-off?
And they're not shy about repackaging it and charging us more. They didn't even offer that opportunity.
But I think
they didn't try to sell it that much either, I don't think.
This is what I'm saying.
But it is also, I go back to, I mean, we've talked, in the beginning of the year, every year we talk about things that are entering the public domain, right? And like, if I think about the spirit of the law with public domain and why we do it versus the letter of it and how it actually works, to me it seems like the idea is the spirit of the law is to be created in a world so that something like a Looney Tunes catalog, which has such cultural significance, and by the way, a lot of people have already made a lot of money on back in the 40s and 50s and 60s, that somehow that then gets put into the world and preserved and becomes available to everybody, because everybody that made their money on it made their money, enough money has been made, and now we have deemed this important enough that you have access to it. And it feels like this is the kind of thing that we should somehow have all have access to. I get that the economics aren't making that happen, but I don't know.
And to your point about the people saying you can swap out, and museums do swap out various exhibitions, usually because you have similar kinds of genres. Do you know another Looney Tunes? I do not.
The only comparable thing would be Disney coming up at the same time.
Yeah, but it's not.
It's not the same character. I'm just saying it's other animation.
Right. That's right. And I would say that argue the same thing actually for Sesame Street. It stands apart from different kinds. So it's the swap out thing doesn't quite work.
Get it. And there also seems to still be a market for it. People still want to watch this stuff. There's a current Looney Tunes movie in theaters right now.
They don't have any problem putting that sports stuff on my channel, but do they offer Looney Tunes to me? Oh no.
Because the Looney Tunes aren't getting $6.1 billion. That's why. Well, that means it's time for our lightning round. These are the stories that caught our attention this week. Callie, what's yours?
Well, I am very excited about this little story that's attached to the White Lotus. As you know, it's a big cultural juggernaut. People are excited and watching it intensely. There are only 3 episodes.
Can't wait for the next one on Sunday.
There are some shocking reveals that have already happened. It's not my cup of tea. Can't stand these people. Don't like the premise. However, having said that, I love something that it draws me, that is attached to the show. So Jake Edwards, a British YouTuber with nearly 1.5 million subscribers, started sussing out the books that the characters are reading and whether or not the books that they're reading really have anything to do with their characters or make any other kind of statement. And I just love the fact that he was able to.
You're not going to do any spoilers here, right?
No. These are books. You can see these people. So one of them, one of the twins, one of the Lachlan twins, is reading an Oxford World Classic called Hunger by Knut Hamsun. Who the hell knows this? But it's an Oxford World Classic. But here's my favorite. Brenda is reading a book by Thomas Erickson entitled Surrounded by Narcissists, or How to Stop Other People's Egos from Ruining Your Life. Bestseller, by the way. Those are real books.
Yep.
Then he sussed out that there's another one that's probably a fake book that they made just to go for the character. I love this.
I'll tell you who else probably loves it is Mike White, the writer of the show, because for sure he has put some thought into what books, or either he or the prop set people, somebody has decided that there was a reason to do that, and somebody like catching that, I'm sure they're very.
And so you got me, who couldn't care less about this, paying attention.
But now you like the people because they're all readers, don't you? All right, Edgar, what's yours?
Well, sort of a sad day, or a wistful day, I guess, at the Chicago Sun-Times. It is Richard Roper's last day. He took a buyout at the Chicago Sun-Times. Longtime film critic. People might remember him from, he took over for Gene Siskel after Gene Siskel went with Roger Ebert and Roper. He was a movie critic for 30 plus years, nearly 40 years at the Chicago Sun-Times. He has said he's not retiring, but it came time for him to take a buyout. One thing that really caught my eye in this is WBEZ, which is a public broadcasting station. They now own their
WBEZ,
WBEZ,
yes, mm-hmm.
And the Chicago Sun-Times.
Mm-hmm.
They have only 107 current employees. 35 have accepted buyouts, including Roper. So just like a very skeleton kind of crew to be running a public media / newspaper operation. But I love film criticism using the written word, and I'll miss it. I'll miss him.
Me too.
That's about lots of things going away this week, including the Statue of Liberty. That's my lightning round.
Where's it going?
In case anybody missed it, we talk a lot about repatriation on this show, and France wants the Statue of Liberty back. So this came from a progressive member of the European Parliament who said, you know what, your values and the reason we gave you the Statue of Liberty to welcome immigrants to America and to protect independence and rights and all of the other things that have been the embodiment of this country, this official said that the Statue of Liberty should come back. And not surprisingly, the White House says, no, we're not sending her back. But I thought this was really interesting. First of all, she's like a big Lego piece. She came in 350 pieces when she came over to be assembled. They gave us the Statue of Liberty, whose official title is Liberty Enlightening the World. Let's take a moment to think about that.
Interesting.
And we built the pedestal, and that came from a lot of small donations from around the country, families giving just small amounts to create that image that would welcome immigrants to America. So if you see the drones flying around the Statue of Liberty, maybe they're just, it's the French trying to...
Drones in New Jersey have been a thing, folks.
That's right.
That's true. That's a good point.
All right, well, that is all for this edition of The Culture Show. Tune in Monday for the actors and writers behind the new film, The Ballad of Wallace Island. We'll also be joined by 2 of the figure skaters competing in the ISU World Figure Skating Championship. And a programming note, tomorrow night at 8, the Boston Symphony Orchestra celebrates the legacy of John Coltrane, and you can hear it live on 89.7. Trumpeter Terrence Blanchard joins the BSO for a new symphonic arrangement of Coltrane's iconic jazz melodies. This GBH music broadcast starts at 8 o'clock tomorrow night, and that's live from Symphony Hall. Thanks today to the BPL technical and logistics crew. Maddie Geyer, Bill Francis, Sandra Lopez-Burke, Juan Jose Cadena, Chris Hanks, Pat Lally, and Olivia Corcio. Thank you, everybody here at the library who came down to visit us today. We love seeing you. We love being a part of this show with you. Thanks also to the Lenox Hotel and to the Newsfeed Cafe. I'm Jared Bowen. Have a liberty-filled weekend.
Where's Mary? Where is she? Where is she? She's just about to close up the library.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
GBH's All Things Considered is coming up this afternoon.